Then I can continue my notes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, and I apologize for being 5 minutes late, but I was taking care of some business, so it was serious. All right. Could we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance by Mrs. Strickland?
Yes, everyone please rise.
I'm
yes.
sorry, got to have a motion to come out of closed session.
So
Please
moved.
forgive me.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance, Mrs. Strickland.
Everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No. Okay. All right, Dr. Dunsmore?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We do have Dr. McKibben here to present the demographic study. This did go through our facilities committee and a recommendation here. He's here to talk about what will be involved in that study and to ask for approval to move forward. Dr. McKibben.
Thank you, Dr. Dunsmore. Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I want to use an example today from a district we're working on right now in North Carolina, Cabarrus, reasonable, same size, a lot of the same demographic characteristics, a lot of the same issues, and kind of walk you through the procedure of how a demographic forecast is done for school district and enrollment. One thing, if you could hold your questions to the end, usually works out much better because the answer is usually 2 slides down. So, first thing I need to point out is this procedure is forecasts, not projections. They're 2 different things. A projection is where you take a past trend, usually year-to-year survivorship, second to third, third to fourth, over a period of time, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, create an algorithm and use that to literally project your enrollment into the future. Very quick, easy, efficient, relatively cheap, and up until the 1990s, about all we had, because we didn't have the data to do anything differently. The problem with a projection is it's almost never right. The only way a projection can be accurate is that what's happened over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years replicates itself over the next 5 or 10, which it almost never does. A demographic forecast is a 2-step procedure. First, you calculate a total population forecast, the entire population, 0 to 4 to 85 plus, for each one of your attendance areas, which sum to the district total, and the results of that population forecast then drive an enrollment forecast. So it's your current demographic dynamics and your future demographic trends which influences your future enrollment, not your past trends. So basically the procedure here, and be quite honest, the actions in the population forecast, the enrollment forecast, just come along for the ride, okay? So to understand what your future enrollment is going to be, you have to understand what your population's doing, okay? And what are the symptomatic variables that are really going to dictate what your future enrollment is going to be. Traditionally, most people, most school districts, a lot of consultants have concentrated on births and new home construction, okay? Neither one of those variables are very good. I'll quickly tell you the 2 reasons why. One, almost half of all children change households from birth to starting school. And for the households, everybody notices new houses going up, and more kids, more people and all that. 90% of the housing market in most school districts is existing home sales. That's the real driver of future population change. What's your existing home sales doing? Okay. For example, here in Wayne County, the last 3 years, you've had just over 4,000 existing homes sold. Okay. You've had not even 400 new homes built. So if you're looking at future population enrollment change, you have to look at existing home sales, so, amongst other things. Basically, it's 5 major parts. One, you have to start with a base population. You do a full population profile for each one of your attendance areas, because they're all going to be different. We don't use national models, state models, regional, whatever. We use everything as specific as possible to each one of your attendance areas. And we've used the 2010 census. Now I know it's 8-year-old data. What good is that? I'll get to that in a later. But it's still the best conclusive source of small area demographic data. You have to do an age-specific fertility model for each area, mortality model, and migration model. Migration is the key one. And then you use historical enrollment to correlate these demographic changes with your enrollment change. Okay. A lot of sources. In this case, we use school district. We use Cabarrus for this project. We'll use Wayne County data. Any data set we could lay our hands on. Internal Revenue Service, I have an example of that. Internal Revenue Service is a great source for migration data. And then the Census Bureau, any of their data coming out. Any also local sources. We use Zillow and Realty Track for your home sales. You get it right down to the parcel level. What most people don't realize is everything about your house is public domain data. It's usually up on the internet right now. So I like to have more than one data source whenever available. Now, the most important predictive variable for population change, not births, not designated migration, it's your age structure. And I want to go through here the top 5 variables we're going to look at. Number 1, number of women in prime childbearing age. Prime childbearing age is defined as between 20 and 34 years old. 80% of all births occur to women in those age groups. Despite what you've read in the popular press, fertility rates in this country haven't changed much in the last 40 years. They've stayed in a nice, tight 10% band between 1.8 and 2.0 children per woman in her lifetime, okay? When you're looking at changes in number of births, it's not changes in the birth rate, it's the number of women in prime childbearing age. If you don't have women between 20 and 34, you're not going to have that many births, okay? Changes in mortality rates, again, they've stayed in a very, very tight range. But, you know, if not reported much in the paper, but one of my favorite facts is the number of deaths in this country have gone up about 20% in the last 10 years. Not due to any plague going on. We just have more people in what we in demography refer to as prime dying age. I know we're going to find a better term than that, but that's what we're using right now. I used to say it was anybody over the age of 60, but now that I'm 62, it's anybody over the age of 80. But again, mortality rates don't change that much. If you're seeing changes in the number of deaths, it's due to your age structure, okay? Your in and out migration, okay? Every area in the country, no matter how wonderful or how bad it is, has people moving into that and people moving out of it. Wayne County, like Cabarrus, has a very, very similar in and out migration pattern. The bulk of your in-migration is people ages 25 to 40 years old and 0 to 9, okay? Your biggest outflows are people over the age of 70 and ages 18 to 24 years old. Group quarters, which would cover the air base, we do that separately, but your indigenous population, your high school seniors are graduating, moving away, and most of them don't come back, okay? That's your biggest out-migration flow. So how many people are in those age groups, where they are in the life course, dictates what your in-migration and out-migration flows are going to be. And then with the IRS data, it helps tell us where they're coming from and where they're going to. And then also local determinant factors, zoning, water and sewer, commercial, again, home sales, any kind of local information we can lay our hands on. We'll also include that in the formulation of the models, okay? The best way to understand what your population is doing is we use the population pyramid, okay? Refer to this as your demographic fingerprint. No two geographic areas have the exact shape and distribution of population, all right? And they're very easy to read, okay? This one example here, your 0 to 4, that's your preschool population. 5 to 9, that's roughly your elementary. 10 to 14 is middle, 15 to 19 is high school. Again, 20 to 34, is your, we call family formation ages. Again, that's where most births are going to occur, people in those age groups. 35 to 54 are the ages where most people have kids in school, okay? Now, there are exceptions to that. I was one of them. I was a first-time father at 40, so I was 58 when my son was a senior in high school and went to his graduation. Everybody told me what a nice, well-behaved grandson I had. And but by that time, most people are usually done with having kids. 55 to 69 are referred to as empty nest households, which, by the way, is your fastest growing household type in the county, okay? These are the households where their last child has graduated high school, but they haven't downsized. And then over 70 is what we refer to as the turnover ages. Now, you'll see a slight uptick at 62 and another one at 65, but most people don't downsize their homes till they're in their 70s. It's not retirement that triggers downsizing, it's the death of one of the spouses. Then the house is too big, maintenance becomes a problem, kids will move the surviving parent in, or they'll move in with them, whatever the case may be. And we're noticing, not only here, but across the country, that the elderly are staying in their homes longer. And one of the big reasons for that is there's a chronic shortage of elder housing in this country. They haven't caught up yet. So the old days of, well, we'll sell this house, get someplace smaller and live off the equity, not really the case anymore, because a lot of the places you're moving into are almost as expensive as your house. So this is one of the dynamics we're keeping a really, really close eye on. Now, in the case of Cabarrus County, this was the district's population pyramid. And a couple things that jump out here. You'll notice that very, very few people, 20 to 34, relatively speaking, because it's a suburban county. You don't come out of college and buy a house. You come out of college and rent an apartment. You get married, start your family, then you buy a house, which is one reason why their 0 to 4 bar is so much smaller. We call it the deficit. So if no one moved into Cabarrus County, and they just left to their own demographic devices, their elementary enrollment should have dropped by 500 students over the next 5 years. It didn't. It actually went up 500. Well, right there we have a measurement that we can then measure quantitatively to that area. They've had 1,000 0 to 4-year-olds move in over a 5-year period. And from that, you can generalize household patterns, because it's been my experience in the 30 years I've been doing this that when a 4-year-old moves, they tend to take the whole family with them. Not always, but most of the time. So that's how you start building age-specific migration models to specific areas. Now, this is for the district as a whole. This is a very, very key point. If we put all of the Cabarrus County attendance areas up there, you'll notice that none of them would look like this pyramid, because each area has its own unique demographic dynamics. I cannot emphasize that point enough. When we do redistricting, the first thing the parents in the area say is, our area is different. My response is, you're absolutely right, and here's how you're different. And here's how you're the same, too, because we look at the data for their specific area. Now, a couple of examples here, and this is from the same district, Cabarrus. This is Cox Mill. This is one of their fast-growing homes are being built there very quickly, and you'll notice, you can see the impact. A lot of the 30 and 40-year-olds, these homes are north of 600,000. So there's a great rule in demography. You can have money, you can have kids, but you can't have both. So, and it works with housing too. The higher the house cost, the fewer the kids the later you are in life. Most 28-year-olds aren't going to go out and buy a $600,000 house. Can't get a mortgage for it, for starters. So you see they're all moving out. Very, very few people in their 20s. There's no apartments there. They can't afford to live there. They're bringing their kids with them. Just 2 attendance areas over, you have Coltrane Webb. Old, established community, very even distribution across the ages, very, very stable, okay? And then Weinkauf is an area with a high number of apartments. So you notice instead of a deficit in the 20s, there's actually a little bit of a surplus. There's no deficit in the 0 to 20s. Housing tenure, which is owners versus renter, is one of the key variables we look at, and that really dictates the dynamics of each individual area. How many houses are single-family detached? How many are owner-occupied? And then prices are also a key factor. The more expensive the house, the older and smaller the household. The lower the rent, the younger and the more kids tend to see there. Now, just for comparison, I've put the Wayne County, we pulled your census data in the 2010. Two things jump out here. One is the high number of 20 to 24. Part of that's the airbase, okay? But you'll notice that you don't have a deficit in 0 to 4, you have a surplus. So between 2010 and 2015, your elementary enrollment should have gone up by about 300 students. And we can compare that to what it actually did and start looking at the factors that if it did, that's good. If it didn't, why not? If it exceeded that, what caused that also? Again, looking at specific factors. But I can tell you now that if we did a population pyramid for all of your elementary attendance areas, none of them would look like this. They would all have their own unique demographic characteristics. Okay. One of the things we also look at is 7 different variables. Pardon me a second. Okay. Thank you. I lost my, here it is. To illustrate this point, there's several key variables here we're looking at. Households under 18 population, total households, population, persons per household. The bottom is the total for the district, okay? And what I want to emphasize here is the fact that how much variation you see across these different attendance areas. That, some are close to the district average, but not on all the variables. So they all have their unique characteristics and try to identify them. And just for comparison's sake here, for Wayne County, your households percent under 18 population, about 34%, and it's dropping. So right off the bat, 2/3 of the households in the school district don't have under 18 population in them, which includes preschoolers. That's pretty close to the national average. There's not a school district in the United States where households with school-age kids make up a majority. Last one was in Utah about 15 years ago. Household size, 2.5. And again, here you can see in Cabarrus, it's 2.7, and then runs a gamut above 3 to almost down to 2. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Okay, percent of homeowners 35 or 35 to 54. These are the ones with kids in school. For Wayne, it's about 37% and dropping. Okay, and I keep using this term empty nest, and I need to stop on that for a second and kind of expand that. Traditionally, when we say empty nest, we're talking about when the last child graduates high school, moves away, and there's no kids left in the household. But you can be empty nest of preschool. You could be empty nest of preschool and elementary, preschool, elementary, and middle school, as you're going through the life course. Many of the households that have under 18 population in the district are already empty nested of preschooler and elementary. A lot of them just have kids in the middle and the high school. And that's not for all the elementary areas, but you're going to see that trend differently, different magnitudes as you go across the district. You need to identify that. That's why you can't use district-wide trends and generalize them to each one of the elementary attendance areas, because they're all going to have unique characteristics. Again, tying back to that age structure. Homeowners, 65 plus. And for the county here, it's 23%, which is actually good, which means over the next 10 years, again, varying degrees of different attendance areas, you're going to have a relatively large number of existing housing units that probably now don't have school-age kids in them, turning over and allowing new young families to move into them. So areas that you may not have seen school-age kids come out, particularly elementary, for, last 10, 15 years, you might see it starting to creep up as it turns over. That's why the housing unit assumptions are so key here. I'll get more on that later. And then owner-occupied, Cabarrus is 75, you're at 62, which is actually good because you have a large body of rental properties for young families to start their homes or their families, then move out to other parts of the district. So you're not dependent upon out-of-county migration coming in like Cabarrus was. They live and die by their flows coming in from the Charlotte area. Okay. Single-person households, even suburban Cabarrus is at 21%. You're at 27, again, not surprising for an area that has so many apartments in it. And then the single-person households over 65 is a proxy measurement. If it's a homeowner area, these are areas where the spouses have probably already passed away, and there's a very quick turnaround. So the higher the proportion, and you're at 10.5% right now. So there's probably a healthy number of households that will be turning over the next 5 to 10 years because there already are single-person elderly. My favorite data from 2010 census. This is the individual year of age for the count. And in 2010, 5-year-olds are kindergarten, 6-year-olds are first grade, 7 or second grade. But you go forward till 2015, that under one column is now 5 years old. That's your kindergarten. 1-year-olds, first grade, second, third. So we can match up once we geocode your students or get student transfers back in their home areas. We can compare what the count is with what the census count was. What we're trying to do here is take out what we call the cohort effect. And there's an example here where you'll see like the Bethel area. 3-year-olds at 110, drops to 92 the next year, goes back up to, looks like 108. So if you're just looking at a cohort effect, cohort survival, oh, we dropped 18, we're declining, oh, we're back up, 16 next year, we're growing again. Well, no, it's just a cohort coming in now. We can filter that out, okay? You'll notice a thing here for at least Cabarrus is how these younger cohorts are so much smaller, 2,000, 2,100 coming in, 2,600 in the 6, 7, and 8-year-old range. That shows us how much they have to make up with in-migration just to get those cohorts back up to break even. They need 500 kids moving in over a 5-year period per cohort just to break even, which kind of befuddled them too. So what we do for each attendance area, and here's an example at the district level, is we call it the market share, and we take your actual enrollment and we compare it to what the census count was for that cohort in 2010 and bring it forward, and we look at the percentages. If the percentages are going up, it's in migration. If it's going down, they're going someplace else, okay? And we can do that over time, and we can correlate that with your home sales, your home building, whether or not a charter opens up or not, or closes, you know, and we can do that by attendance area and see what actually are the demographic trends and dynamics in that specific area with that population. Live attend analysis, quickly how you read that, but the quicker thing here is when you geocode the students, you basically want to put them back in their home attendance area. And across the top is the kids who attend the school. I get down is the, no, down's the column is a 10, across is where they live. The green numbers diagonal are the ones who both live and attend in that area. And what we can do there is again, put the kids back in their home attendance area. So if you have a transfer policy or you have magnet programs like that, you know, you're not trying to guess about, okay, well, we've got X number of kids going to this magnet school that came from this area. We actually have, you know, empirical evidence on it and put them back in there for the analysis. Migration housing data, again, Internal Revenue Service. Since 1990, the Internal Revenue Service has been doing their migration files. We have them all back to 2000. What it does is when you file your taxes, and say you lived 1 year in Wayne, then you went to Mecklenburg County. That counts as a migrant. And what they'll do is they'll tell you, or they'll have a record here of, here is a person who lived in one county in one tax year, moved to live in the next, and the returns are households, the exemptions are people. So from those two, we can tell what the migration flow is. And in this particular case, if there's more than 10 households going from one county to another, they list them, both by household number of people, so we can see where the people were. In this case, for Cabarrus, where the households were moving in from, and also the out-migrating households where they were going to, okay, and calculate that out-migration flow. Not surprising, most people going into Cabarrus were from Mecklenburg, but what kind of surprised them was most of the out-migration flow was also going to Mecklenburg. That kind of surprised them. And then one of the other things, and I love this doing it in the South, is because everybody is convinced that everybody who moves into the South is a Yankee refugee. They're not, you know. In fact, most of your migration is within 75 miles. That'll cover about, usually in most cases, over 2/3 of your migration flow. It's short distance migration. I won't trouble you with whole migration theory right now, but northerners coming down, a very relatively small proportion. I mean, you notice them, they talk funny, they follow strange sports teams, they're trying to figure out what kind of wine goes with grits, you know, it's just, you know, a whole different group. But if you understand the dynamics here, if we put the flows up for Wayne County, you're going to see a lot out of Orange, a lot out of Wake. You know, that's probably going to be two biggest flows right there, okay? Both in and out. And that's the whole thing. That's the job of the demographer, not only to measure your inflows, the positive aspects of population change, but also the negatives and the outflows. We have to look at both sides of the equation, okay? There's the example of how it is for Cabarrus. The green line is the net, which is positive, but you know, strong inflow, but also strong outflow. You know, and that's why a lot of these trend analysis ones wind up having forecasts are too high. They're only looking at the positive aspects and not looking at the negative and the out-migration flows. Building permit data, again, it's all up online now. We can get it back to the year 2000 by jurisdiction. We use those in there as well. Building permits, and again, Wake is probably in the same position as a lot of areas of the country. Far higher building today than it was in 2010, and this is Cabarrus, you know, with just bursting at the seams growth. But even in high growth Cabarrus, the peak of 16 and 17 is nowhere near the peak of 05, 06, and 07. Most areas have not returned to their building levels of 15 years ago. And the point I tried to point out to them was all those households that moved out in early last decade have now aged through, and those kids are now graduating out and going away and becoming empty nesters. So there's an outflow dynamic going on as well. The assumptions, the key ones, I just want to go through the main ones right here. Probably the most important assumption in the forecast is the 30-year fixed interest rate stays below 5%. Okay, that's a key one. You can't buy a house, you can't move in unless you can get a mortgage if you're in a single-family attached home, clear as it is. We've seen 30-year fixed rate go up 1 percentage point in the last year. We're at 4.8, we were at 3.8 last year at this time. We're getting real close, okay? Now, to those of us in the room who are old enough to remember the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, when the 30-year fixed rate was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12%. My first house loan in '85 was at 6 3/4, and I thought I was just stealing the bank blind. 5 sounds pretty good, right? These kids today, going out buying houses, see nothing but 3, 3.5, and 4 over the last 8 years. 5 sounds like highway robbery. And there's another factor in there. You may have seen the article that came out a few months back where the average college graduate comes out with $35,000 in student loan debt. What the article didn't tell you was the average college graduate marries a college graduate. $70,000 household debt. That's why the mortgage approval rate in this country is only running at 62% right now. So that's probably one of the key ones. How your housing market works has a very strong impact of what your population dynamics are going to be, and then move in. We'll also incorporate the impact of House Bill 13 in here too. God knows what the legislature will do next. Your transfer policies hold constant. We tend to hold all your admin policies constant, and there's a reason for that. One, I have no idea what your policies will be in 2020, and the second thing is when you look at the results of the population enrollment forecast, it's based on socioeconomic demographic factors only, not due to any kind of policy changes. Commercial real estate, and that's, I did it in 20 minutes. Questions?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Preacher?
You mentioned empty nest several times. My thinking on empty nest is the kids are out of the house, and I will tell you, it's a wonderful thing.
It is.
It really is, but
But even better when they graduate college.
Kind of came to mind. I'm really glad that you've covered this material that you've covered this evening, because it's more than, when you look at redistricting school systems, it's more than just moving a line.
Mhm.
And it's more obviously than just a year's process or a 2 or 3 month process. And I think a lot of what our community has kind of taken from this is that, you know, this board is approaching this, you know, to do it immediately. And you've proven to me tonight that it's a 2 or 3 year process at least, by gathering all of the data and doing what you've got to do. The moratorium is definitely going to help to start, but our biggest thing is making sure as well that when we are being good stewards and fiscal people of the taxpayers' money, when we start building schools and that type of thing, because we need to make sure that we're building them in the right places for years to come. And that I think more so than anything else is the key to what we're looking at here. We have had a tradition in the past where we've had to utilize a lot of mobile homes. We even built and still had to use mobile homes or mobile classrooms or educational cottages, as some of our past board members called them. But the point I think that this board is interested in as well is building, if we're going to construct in the right places that we need, that's going to endure through the time of payment and paying off of those buildings, to make sure that we're putting them in the right places.
You've hit the nail on the head, sir. And I tell this district too. Every district should redistrict every 15, 20 years. But since it's kind of like having a root canal done every day for 6 months, they tend to push it down the road a little bit. Because the demographic dynamics of the life course of an area is going to turn over every 15, 20 years. Sometimes it takes 25, 30. When you build a building, you're stuck with it there for 50, 60, 70 years, okay?
And nationally, they tell you the school building's only good for 40 years.
Well, you tend to renovate it out and all that, but the other problem is, and we're seeing this in North Carolina right now, is buildings literally shrinking before our eyes. And they have been shrinking for years, okay? I go to a lot of school districts in the Midwest. Elementary schools that were quote, built for 600 are now only at 450 because of square foot requirement. When Cabarrus is a great example, okay? Fast growing district, they're bringing in 900 student elementary online this year to try to get their utilization at the elementary level below 100%. It's not going to work. Why? Because they're going to lose 1,800 seats with House Bill 13. So I'm trying to explain to them, even though you're bringing this new 900 seat one online, you're not even making up for half what you lost.
Right.
Okay. And now luckily for them, they build it in the right place. Okay. The next one, we're working on that one. Okay. So you have to build them in the right place, and you have to build them far enough apart that there's enough flexibility in the boundaries that they can breathe. They're going to have to change those boundaries over time. Sure. And if you've got two elementaries within a quarter mile of each other, If you want to see how it's done wrong, go to Cobb County, Georgia. They just completely screwed it up. There's got to be some breathability there because, one area is going to age out. You're going to shift the boundaries into the growth area. It's going to start turning over. You need to start bringing it back and all that. So when we draw boundaries, and we've redistricted, a couple hundred districts the last 30 years, a lot easier now with GIS, but you got to be able to draw into those trends. What we're seeing now is a lot of districts, particularly in the Midwest and in the South, where they are closing existing facilities that are just too expensive to renovate now and building new ones to replace it. And the propensity is, well, we already have the land, let's build it in the same place. Well, it may have been a great place 50, 60 years ago. It's not the right place to put it now. Huntsville, Alabama did that, and they're in federal court now for putting it in the wrong place. So, because the population shifted to the east and they put it back in the downtown area.
You mentioned Cobb County.
Yeah.
I've spoken with school board members in Gwinnett County. I know they're building 6 new schools every year in that particular county.
Not anymore, they're not.
So,
Their enrollment is topped out and starting to
is
flatten.
it maxed out now?
Yeah, it's because they had that big wave come out 15, 20 years ago, and they all empty nested at once. And their problem, where they're building the new 6 new schools, goes back to the point you were making, and kind of opposite of Cobb. All of Gwinnett's buildings are in the southwest part of the district. The pop growth's in the northeast. So they've got buildings where they don't have kids, they got kids where they don't have buildings. And Cobb County wound up drawing elementary attendance lines like the country of Chile, trying to get enough kids in there, So, and because it was poor planning, Now, I'm sure it made sense to whoever was there 20 years ago. Now they're sitting there going, what moron thought this up, And they're paying through the nose for it too, not in underutilized buildings, but the transportation costs are going through the roof.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith?
Yes, very good presentation.
Thank you.
A couple of things. I did not hear you mention socioeconomics until the very end. And throughout the presentation, I was kind of looking for where or if that was a part of the study. And the reason for that is because in a low wealth county like we have here in Wayne, you'll probably hear that in the next presentation. I think the next presentation says that 68% of the children here in Wayne County are low wealth. So when you start looking at the socioeconomic demographic, which has got to play a part somewhere, and looking at the data that explicitly says that schools that are primarily low socioeconomic in their demographic makeup tend to be failing schools. How does that play in the overall interpretation of all this data? Because right now I'm just looking at just numbers, and it looks good as far as numbers are concerned, but we have other factors to consider. Secondly, there's not a lot of enthusiasm in this area about building new schools. The enthusiasm coming from our county commissioners is we need to fill the ones we have. So how does all of that play into your presentation?
Well, two different things there. One, I'll go with the second one first. There's only 2 reasons to build a school. You don't have enough space in your current facilities, or you have a facility or facilities currently that are no longer capable of serving as education. They're unsafe. You can't heat them, you can't cool them. The maintenance is too high. It's more expensive to keep them going. So it's either replacement or for growth, sometimes for both, okay? To judge whether or not a building is economically feasible to keep going, that's something an architect's going to have to tell you. I can't do that. So for growth or distribution, sometimes you want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, we have a bad distribution, as you said, and we have old buildings here. Let's change the distribution and put new buildings someplace else. You just take something offline. A lot of school districts right now in this country, doing a couple projects in the Midwest right now, we're closing 2, building 1, okay? Because the 2 older ones they're 70 years old, they're 60 years old, and they're spending $1.5 million, $2 million a year on deferred maintenance, just keep the place running. It's just not worth it. So that's one out too. So the whole thing, you're not growing does not necessarily mean you don't need new schools. Well, we're staying flat. My granddad went to that school. It's good enough for him. It's good enough for me. Well, that may be the problem. It's old enough for your granddad to go there. So things like that. Socioeconomic depends what the district wants. Cabarrus really wasn't interested in it. If we're doing redistricting and the district's under a consent order, we'll also do forecasts by race and ethnicity. Look at socioeconomic. Your best proxy variable now is free reduced lunch. If you follow the court cases out of Seattle and Louisville, you can no longer use race alone as a factor for redistricting. You have to include socioeconomic status in there. Our free reduced lunch numbers are going up all over the country because they're changing the parameters on it. And there's no longer a strong correlation between free reduced lunch and school performance because the proportions have gone up. 62% is actually not too far from the national average now, okay? There's a host of reasons for that, and there's other variables involved. So if the district wants to look at that and look at the boundaries that keep it, you have to be within 15%. That's the federal law. If you don't, you're going to wind up in court for both race and ethnicity and socioeconomic, i.e. free reduced. So if you're going to do that, that has to be part of the procedure. As long as you're, but 62%, I like to use 10 just to be on the safe side. You're still looking at 52 to 50 or 72. It's still a pretty wide range. So it depends on how many variables you want to use in your redistricting criteria. No district uses just one. Okay, Cabarrus is using utilization and transportation. They're the two big ones for them. Okay, I've seen as many as 5. Gets a little sticky when you get above that. So, but you can add more than just one to it.
Are there any other questions?
I do.
Mr. Flowers?
I listened to your presentation, and it appears to me that most of this data is directed at, in the event that we wanted to build a new school, where to build it at. I don't know, when you were asked for your to come here and represent your company, exactly what you were told, but that is not on the horizon in Wayne County right now as I see it, building a new school. Now, what I need to know from you is, we have, as we speak tonight, school districts that are somewhere, and I'm going to use round numbers, 80% populated, joining another school district that are at 120%.
Mm-hmm.
They join one another.
Mm-hmm.
I've not been able to get, as a board member, momentum to move those district lines. What I need to hear from you, and would you provide us with the current data, not the future data or planned data or projected data, but with the current data, a list of maps or your with your placing the district lines to balance our school districts, our population in our schools. That's one thing. The second thing, we spoke about social economics, but we have school districts in Wayne County where the actual schoolhouse is in the extreme right-hand top north corner of the district. And in my opinion, those districts were drawn in the past to keep the poor kids on one side of the creek so that the more affluent kids would be on the other side of the creek. And I'm not trying to be offensive, I don't mean it that way, but it's time in Wayne County that we speak to the real issue. And does your company, can you come in here and draw us a plan where in those school districts that the school would be in a centralized location as much as possible, to where all of the children would attend the school that's nearest to them? That's the kind of data I need. This data that you gave us right here is not going to help me.
Well, first off, let me say, I can guarantee you, sir, that I can draw a map that will offend everybody in this county. I can guarantee you that right now.
Well, I think, sir, I believe we can do that, but
I'm sure
anyway.
you could.
um,
When we did Atlanta some years back, and actually it was closed 13 schools there. They want to close 9. We just did everything. We all got emails from angry parents, Google satellite shots of our house saying, "We know where you live." I said, "Well, I live in South Carolina. All my neighbors are armed, so I think twice about coming over here." My job is not to make people feel good. My job is to make you, or give you the information you need to make hard decisions and back it up empirically. You can come in right now and draw boundaries, make them as central as possible, as balanced as possible, using whatever variables you like, okay? Most efficient, I like to use that one, and that no one will like, okay? Drawing the boundaries are easy. Defending them is tough. But if I can disagree with you, sir, no, you do need this forecasting data, because you want boundaries that not only work today, you want boundaries that work in 2024 and 2028.
Sir, let me
Because the
stop
last
you right,
thing
let
you
me,
wanna
let
do
me
is have to
stop
go
you
back
right there and
do it
ask you
again.
this. Now, Wake County,
Yeah.
it's my understanding that they adjust their district lines basically every year.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's feasible to move district lines one time and they be there for any long period of time.
I will send you, sir, 15, 20, 30 examples of districts I've done all over this country where you can. The problem with Wake County is they don't hire demographers, and they've got politicians and statistical people trying to solve a short-term problem because they won't make a tough decision because they don't want to tick people off, okay? If you want someone to come in from the outside, I don't have a horse in this race, and just tell you the off-the-cuff empirical, this is what you need to do, I will do that.
That's,
You
well, let me
have to
ask
make
you,
the hard
let me ask you
decision.
this. I know you've been doing this, and obviously you're good at it, and I appreciate that. And I don't, I just, you need to understand the dynamics before you come to Wayne County, in my opinion. We don't always have a board of education that's in complete agreement about moving district lines. And you don't always have an administration that is behind moving district lines. So,
Most cases, you're not going to find either one of
what I
those
need to
districts.
hear from you is the cold, hard-blooded facts. And if we hire you, I don't want you to be my friend. That's not what it boils down to.
I trust you, sir. I
want
won't
to-
be, so.
I want to know the cold, hard-blooded facts, and I need to know them as soon as possible, not
Yeah.
3 years from now.
Okay. The question that no one's asked that I'm going to answer anyway, I will be the first place, how accurate are these forecasts? If you can go out and spend this kind of money for a population enrollment forecast, how close are they going to be? Plus or minus 2% for the life of the forecast. 3% at the school level, okay? And every year for the first 2 years afterwards, we go to our school, every school that we've ever done, send us your new ADM numbers, we do performance evaluations on them, usually within 0.5%. You know, we're hitting ones right on the nose right now. They tend to be rock solid because they're demographic ones. You know why they're accurate? It's because look at both sides of the equation. Again, we're not here to make anybody feel good, the Chamber of Commerce or people say it's a wonderful place. You know, I'll be honest with you folks, your county is aging, and that's going to be one of the major demographic factors according to that. And some areas are aging faster than the others. And until you identify what those areas are, you cannot address the demographic issues going to affect the population, okay? And going back to the point the gentleman was alluding to here, let me give you my favorite stat on that, okay? Why we're seeing this explosion in diversity of school-age population. Well, it's the migrants, it's the poor people breeding like bunnies, all this other nonsense, baloney. I'll give you a stat on that. The average age of a Hispanic in this country is 28 years old. The average age of a black is 33. The average age of an Asian is 34. The average age of a white is 44. Who's going to have more kids? You know, now those are national numbers. We'll need to see how it breaks down for each one of your areas. And that's the key point. What are your areas doing? What are your demographic dynamics? That's the key point.
Mr. McGivens, thank you very much.
All right,
We
thank
are,
you.
unless there are other questions, we will be in touch. Our superintendent will be in touch
Okay.
with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, let's go to speakers.
Yes, that's fine.
This is fine. All right, Mrs. Smith, sure, baby.
Wayne County Board of Education requests to appear before the board. The Wayne County Board of Education welcomes the opportunity to hear from the public during its regularly scheduled meetings. If you wish to appear before the board, please review the following procedures. Appearance request forms are available to the public at the receptionist desk in the lobby 30 minutes prior to the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak must place their appearance request form along with any handouts in the basket located in the receptionist desk in the lobby. The basket will be collected at 5 p.m. and only those who have an appearance request form in the basket will be allowed to speak. Public comments are scheduled to take place at 5:30 p.m. Presentations are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. The chairperson shall call time on any presentation which exceeds the 3-minute time limit. Organizations or groups wishing to speak about a particular topic may be asked to reduce the time of each individual or to use a spokesperson to share comments on behalf of their organization or group. Substitute speakers will not be permitted, and speakers may not donate any portion of their time to another speaker. No presentation shall include any complaint, criticism, or negative comments regarding the conduct or performance of identified school personnel. No presentation shall include information about a particular student which is privileged and confidential under state and federal privacy laws. The first speaker tonight is Barry Merrill, Dudley, North Carolina. He's speaking as an individual, and his topic is Southern Wayne Gyms and Classroom and Sales Tax Referendum.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Want to say some thank yous to Mr. Flowers and Mr. Henderson and Ms. Strickland particularly, and the Facilities Committee for your support of the Southern Wayne High School gym and classroom projects. Again, speaking on behalf of the community, we really appreciate that. Want to say thank you to Dr. Harrell and Dr. Dunsmore for, as I think Mr. Flowers encouraged, trying to get this thing going, and Mr. Henderson as well, trying to get this thing going as quickly as we can and before I think Mr. Flowers retires from the board. Also want to thank our county commissioners for making the funds available that this project that's been long awaited could happen in Southern Wayne County. Finally, I think maybe some of you at the table might reflect my feelings. I was disappointed that the county commissioners backed away from a property tax increase in the new budget that was approved. They felt, however, that politically it would be more important, and they felt like they could push through a sales tax increase in November. Because that is going to be a continuing, I hope, funding of facilities in Wayne County that we desperately need. We have got a lot of schools that need a lot of help. Southern Wayne, we appreciate that, but there are a lot of other schools that need help too. And we hope that you all will join and enthusiastically support that. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Charles Wright of Goldsboro. He's not representing any organization. His topic, if you want nothing to happen, get a consultant.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, school board members. I come before you stealing a phrase from Mr. Flowers, if you want nothing to happen, get a consultant. I read the News August report, and I hope I'm quoting you correctly, or they was quoting you correctly since I'm repeating it. But you brought up a lot of things that I definitely don't have time to go into with my 3 minutes allowed to me, even though I've had probably about a 25-year history dealing with school board issues, kids, schools, and what have you. But one of the things I want to make sure I brought up is they talked a lot, well, the superintendent mentioned the Evergreen Study. Evergreen Study is still available. They're still there. I talked with a couple of representatives this morning. So they're still there in Florida, and they're still doing the same job. Here's the Evergreen Study final report. If you haven't read it, I suggest you read it. It's 20 pages. Here's the Evergreen draft proposal, 180 pages, if you haven't read it. Now you're wondering, well, how could we get from 180 pages to a final of 20 pages? Well, I'll leave that up to you. I still haven't found anyone that took responsibility. So how the county commissioners pay for this much work and end up getting this much work. But the point I want to bring that up for is a lot of the stuff that was presented by Mr. Kibben is already in here. There's nothing new. And the thing that we have to stay focused on if we want to really move forward is cut out all these variables, the charts, the studies. I was looking at your faces and he lost you for a little while because there was a lot of stuff in there. And this is not hard to do. I was able to do this at my dining room table 10 years ago using an Apple computer and just moving lines and had the social economic, and I could see how each school population could rise. I really had fun. It was fun doing it. And I just wondering if I can do this at home in my dining room. Why is it taking 25 years for us to really address it? And when I started addressing it, my children was in grammar school. Now I have a granddaughter that just started school here in Wayne County Public School, and we're still addressing the same issue. So I would say if you don't have a copy of this, I'll gladly get you a copy. I might want a little bit for the print. But look over what has already been done and look at the stats and look at, and now some of the school population might have changed, but the building hasn't shrunk, the building hasn't gotten any better, and a lot of the data in here could be used as a blueprint for moving forward. And I'd rather see you build off something that's already been established than to go through this process again and hear a lot of things that sound good, but you're paying money for all that statistics. And I don't know if we need all that information to be able to redraw district lines. And as usual, I know it's not your policy to ask questions or to make any comments, but I always like to offer you distinguished board members the opportunity to ask Charles Wright a question. If he or she has one, I'd be more than glad to answer it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. Next up, we have Absolute Assurance here, Mr. Ron Jeanette and Mr. Jonathan Holland, to do their presentation to do random testing for our extracurricular activities.
Good evening, Madam Chair and honorable board members. My name is Ron Jeanette, and I'm here tonight talking about student drug testing. Student drug testing is kind of taking off across everywhere now, and we're talking about testing the athletes. The main reason, they're ambassadors to your school. They're also doing very physical activity, and they don't really need to use certain performance-enhancing drugs. So it's not an unknown factor that student athletes do drugs. What we would like to recommend is testing the student athletes. We would use a 8-panel test. It tests everything from amphetamines, barbiturates, methamphetamines, benzodiazepines, marijuana, cocaine, phencyclidine, opiates, and that's an expanded opiate. It's a broad spectrum test that really is very comprehensive. What we have found, if you give the athlete a reason not to do drugs, I want to play sports, peer pressure is not as great for them. It doesn't help the other students, but it helps the athletes. The ones that are using, it gives them a reason to stop. So it's a win-win situation. How do we do this? We would present at a school, test anywhere from 15 to 20 kids every month at every high school. We would bring a couple to 3 people, come in, get it done quickly, where we do not interfere with classroom instruction. If they can produce specimens, we can do them in probably less than 30 minutes. We'll have some that's a little slow, but if we have help from the school providing water and encouragement to make them go, it's a very fast process. Once it's done, we do an immunoassay on the test. If it's negative, it comes back negative. If it comes back non-negative, then we send it to a certified laboratory, have gas chromatographic mass spectrometry testing done to absolutely be assured of what it's positive for. At that point, we have a medical doctor that is also an MRO. We'll call the parents and hopefully the student at the same time and discuss what was found. The doctor will make the final determination. Not all kids will test positive that are positive. We'll have certain kids that test positive for amphetamines and we'll find it's Adderall and they have a prescription for ADH. They would automatically be called negative. We would come in, do it, have the doctor decide, and we would send the results to whoever the school board wishes, whether it be the principal of the school. Once it's done and you have someone guilty, where do we go from there? We recommend bring the parents in, explain to the student he's got to go through some type of program, which would be up to y'all to decide what it would be. Once he finishes the program, take a return to duty, and he can play next sport. So if he gets caught in football, he will be able to play basketball. He cannot play football again, not till next year. And by doing this, it gives the kid a sense of responsibility to himself and the team. He really wants to play ball, he'll straighten up. We have seen schools that have taken a 25% decrease in positive rates over 5 years. Because the kids realize you come every month, you're going to test every month, we cannot beat your system. Cost, the immunoassay test is $14 per test. If you have any that go to the lab, it will be $32. Any questions of me?
I have one.
Yes, Ms. Strickland?
If a test is positive and so a child is removed from Team A, will they automatically be tested when they come back for the next sport, or is that a policy issue?
That would be a policy issue.
Okay.
We recommend it.
Obviously, okay. But that's not something you guys, it's just a full random test?
But they would automatically, and we recommend you do not test football, baseball, basketball, because what we have found, the student knows you're not going to test me out of season. I can do what I want to. But if they're in a program for the entire school year, so you may test a swimmer in December. So they kind of have to be on their P's and Q's more of not using drugs. Any other questions?
What's some of the recommendations as far as other counties, I'm not going to say surrounding us, but within a reasonable amount of distance from us, or it doesn't really matter, I guess, a school system the size of ours, or we're not talking about so much about the size, we're just talking about trying to help a student who has a drug problem if we can prevent it. So what's some of the recommendations from your company to Wayne County Public Schools Board of Education that, as far as you've already told us that you would recommend that they lose the right to play in that particular sport, but for instance, a football player could then again take a, what'd you say, return to duty test for basketball? Okay, let's just assume that they test positive, or I just got a lot of questions. If they refuse to test, or refuse to give a sample is a positive result. Is that how you look at it?
It is treated as a positive if they refuse to test. You can refuse in many ways. I will not take the test, wait 3 hours and not produce a urine specimen is considered a refusal, or having a specimen that is Smurf blue because they dipped it out of the commode. Those three are refusals.
So you're going to provide, at our school, you would provide an environment that's controlled for them to go in and test in?
We would go into the bathroom assigned to us, and we would like kind of a private bathroom. I'm going to give an example because I went there. Goldsboro High School, you have 2 bathrooms in the auditorium. Not a lot of student traffic. Nobody knows who's being tested. It's kind of a private situation. We would go into the bathroom. We would tape all the water shut. We would put bluing in the commodes, and we would allow 1 person in the restroom at a time. If it comes out cold, it has to be they brought it in or they dipped it in the commode. It's impossible for a live human to give a cold specimen. They have to be deceased to do that.
But as far as, let's just say that, and I'm not saying we will or won't, if this board was decide to implement this testing policy or procedure, obviously we've got football that's already started. How would you go about if we wanted to implement it at the beginning of the school year? How would that work?
First of all, I would recommend sending a letter to every parent of every student athlete and informing them, if you wish your son or daughter to play sports, they have to be in a random drug testing program. Once they sign the letter, most kids are going to get 30 days by the time it gets implemented. At the end of 30 days, all drugs will be out of their system. That gives everybody a fair chance to be clean. Now, if you start quicker, a football team might get caught a little early. I would probably recommend in that case not bring football in till they have 30 days. That way you're giving the guy a chance, or lady, a chance to be clean.
So what if a parent decides that they're not going to sign the form and they don't want their kid tested, then?
And the other districts we do, if the parent does not wish to sign, the student does not play. Now, if a parent decides they don't want their child to be tested later on, and that happens a day of tests when the student calls his parent and says, I don't want to test, and they agree, the parent can take him out of the random program, but he can't play sports.
Mrs. Strickland?
My other question was, you had said you'll randomly test 15 to 20 per school. Do you base those numbers based on the school population?
School population and what other schools do.
Okay.
You know, we have one school that the superintendent and I talked about that's a lot smaller than you, and they do every major sport. Like they test every kid that's going to play a winter sport, spring sport, fall sport. That's a lot more testing that you would really want to require for your size. So I just recommend those numbers.
If you had a school, like, I think Rosa graduated just a little over 140-ish this last go-around, approximately. But then you'll have someone like CB Aycock that graduated, 300. So your percentages would be off. So if you went to one school, you'd be much more likely to get tested than at another. So that's what I was looking at. Do we have kind of a statistical balance?
Probably not, but we can adjust that number. You know, that would be up to the board to decide.
Another policy issue. Okay.
Are you at liberty to share with us the counties in North Carolina that you do serve?
Yes, sir. I have their permission. I do Greene County, Pitt County, Beaufort County. And I know there's 2 more that test with another company. So there's 7 in our close proximity.
But is that all you do in North? Do you go?
That's all I do in North Carolina. I do 12 schools in West Virginia, and I do 6 high schools in South Carolina.
Do you have any, I guess, numbers, not to identify a specific school district, but do you have any numbers that you could compare to before you did the drug testing and then the year after you did the drug testing, if they declined dramatically?
When we started one county 15, 16 years ago, they had a positive rate about 26%. Now they're down to less than 5%. We've just started one county, we've been doing 3 years, and they've dropped about 11% so far. You know, the kids aren't crazy. When they know we're coming, they have a tendency and a reason to say no. And they do say no.
Just helps.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, at this time, we have a Title I presentation from our Federalist Program Department. Dr. Carol Artis will be presenting. And, oh yeah. Are you going to assist as well, Mrs. Key? All right, and Mrs. Key, Assistant Director of Title I Programs.
Madam Chair, Dr. Dunsmore, board members, at your request tonight, I am presenting a presentation outlining the Title I program as implemented by Wayne County Public Schools. I thought it prudent to start first with the law. Title I comes under the ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and this was signed by President Obama in 2015. This is a undercurrent from the 50-year-old law known as Every Student Succeeds Act. So there before you are those, just a summary of why we operate under the auspices that we do. The purpose of Title I is to address the needs of our most impoverished students in our county. Our current poverty rate in Wayne County Public Schools is 68%. So we are using these funds to support not only their academic growth, but their socioeconomic and social emotional growth. Some of these hesitance that they have are including a low spoken and heard vocabulary. They are not exposed to a print-rich environment. They don't have scaffolding experiences such as museums and trips, and some of them have basic care needs. So Title I is designed to address those needs. In order to be a part of the Title I program, you have to have a designation under the law. In North Carolina, you can use 3 different types of data. You can use free and reduced lunch data. You can use what's called the direct certified data, which is what we use here in Wayne County. And then you can also use a combination of both. Here in Wayne County, we use direct certified data, which we get directly from the Child Nutrition Department, and it is all students or families that are currently on SNAP or TANAP, and those are programs previously known as food stamps. Also, any student that is classified as McKinney-Vento or homeless, any student that lives in an institution, or any student that has attended or currently attends Head Start are also considered Title I. So once we get this data, we are directed to rank our schools based on their percentage of poverty. After which, after we do the ranking, the district will then decide the grade span that we will serve and down to what percentage of poverty. Wayne County is 68%, so we must fund down to at least the county rate. So we fund down to 39% in Wayne County, which allows us to cover all elementary schools and most of our middle schools. So before you see all the Wayne County Public Schools ranked in order of poverty, with the poorest school at the top down to the least poor school, using direct certified data. So this is done by the number of students or families at that school who qualify or are on food stamps or temporary food stamps. So if you will look, you will see that those schools in pink are the poorest. They are all the way down to 67. Our county average is 68. We fund all the way down to the white band, which is 39%. We fund down to this position so that we are allowed to use all of our elementary schools in our allocation. You will notice that our high schools are in that band, but they are in bold print, which means we do not serve them. Earlier this school year, or this past school year, the board voted to fund only pre-K through 8, and that is the funding ranking there. So I guess that begs the question, why do we not fund high schools? Well, firstly, Title I is designed to be an early intervention program. So if you look at national Title I data, you will see that 59% of all funds through Title I go to students in kindergarten through 5th. 21% go to schools that house 6 through 8, and only 17% in grades 9 through 12. 3% is in preschool. Here in our county, because of the size of our high schools that fall within that funding band, when serving them, it completely dilutes what we are able to do for our elementary and middle schools. So therefore, we chose, and I proposed to the board at the beginning of this year, and it was approved, to replicate what is done nationally and largely in North Carolina, and we fund pre-K through 8. Now, there are some other impacting factors on Title I allocations, and one of those is the Community Eligibility Program, or CEP. Please note, CEP is not a Title I initiative. It is a child nutrition initiative. So if you look at the bullets there, it tells you how CEP came to fruition and what it takes to be a CEP school, and then what results from that. Title I funds are not tied to CEP funds. But how does it impact Title I? Simply because it dilutes what we are able to do. If a school has a CEP standing, then all of the schools within our district have to be multiplied by 1.6. It's called a multiplier. So that list that I gave you, when you have multiple CP schools, you have to multiply that 1.6 by the poverty rate of every school in the district. Well, then obviously that's going to make everybody's percentage go up. When those percentages goes up, one of two things can happen. More schools fall into the poverty band, and we have to fund more schools with Title I dollars, and the amount at which we fund those schools goes up. But we are not given more money. So in other words, I look at it like my own checkbook. I'll get my paycheck on the 31st. I'm not going to get more money if I go make more bills. I have to make that amount of money spread out over what is present. So we currently fund 22 schools. If we were to use that multiplier, it may go up, I think, to about 26 schools. And then each school would then be diluted. So I think it's very important to know that it impacts it, but it is not adjoined. So for that reason, I told you earlier, we are allowed to either use free and reduced lunch data, which would be the CEP data, or we can use direct certified data. Direct certified data is going to be a little less if you look at what the poverty rate with free and reduced lunch versus the poverty rate with direct certified. Direct certified is going to be a little lower, but it is more representative of those schools. I'll pause there because I know I just said a mouthful. Okay, great. So at this time, Ms. Key is going to come up and tell you, now that you know how we allocate those funds, how we use them in Wayne County.
So on this slide, there is a broad list of categories that principals and the school improvement teams can include in their Title I plan and their supporting budget. In their school improvement plan, which is housed in the NC STAR platform, describes in detail how the fundings are used. It must be included in this plan, approved by the team and the staff, and include a research-based and result-based action. The plan must also be data-driven. Here, you will see what we at the district level can utilize Title I funding to support. These categories include, still broad in scope, are more specific than at school levels. These actions must be included in the district improvement plan and the district Title I plan. This chart outlines the areas of focus this year. As you review the list, you can recognize the names of some of these programs and initiatives. This pie chart tracks the spending at the school site level. You can see the largest portion of the funds is for teacher salaries and benefits, and it's followed by technology.
So before you, you've got our Title I department led by our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. We've very quickly gone through this material, but at this time, I've got before you the Title I department, federal programs actually, and if you have any questions about this presentation or any specific to their department, we can move forward from there.
Mrs. Smith?
Okay.
Yes.
Very good presentation.
Thank you.
One of the things that jumps out at me is somewhat of a, I guess I'm a little confused because the previous presenter, when I presented this 68% poverty rate, his statement was, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, his statement was he doesn't see a correlation between, or that correlation between poverty and low school performance no longer exists. If I'm not mistaken, he said something to that effect. So I'm trying to wrap my mind around it because in your presentation, it clearly says there is a correlation between academic poverty created academic disadvantage. So that one issue concerns me. What do you think about what he said versus what you're presenting?
All the research and educational articles that I've read show a high correlation between students from low socioeconomic backgrounds versus academic achievement. Not because these students are inherently less bright, but because they present at school with disadvantages that are subsequent to the poverty. And I touched on some of those in my presentation, which are they come to pre-K and regular school with a lower spoken and heard vocabulary, less access to print. Some of them have not had the opportunity to experience anything outside of their own neighborhoods or their own county, and when they come to school, they don't have that scaffolding that they need to then be able to start at the finish line. And I know I've done this a million times before, but I always say if you line up all of the children here at the Wayne County Public Schools Central Office, and we're going to race to Kinston, some of them start at Wilbur's. The students who are from what I'll call typical homes, they start at Wilbur's because they've been read to, they've been talked to, they've been to the aquarium, they've got books in their rooms. Where the students from poverty start here on Royal Avenue. So by the time they get to Wilbur's, the people at Wilbur's are now in LaGrange. Then by the time they get to Kinston, we've gotten to LaGrange, but then the school year is over. So then we start the next year, we're now trying to get to New Bern. They're always one pace ahead, and that is because they've started behind. That's why pre-K programs are so terribly important, because they are the first step to closing that gap. And then Title I is designed so as they enter into the school year, those kinds of needs can be addressed.
One last question. The inclusion of the additional schools because of CEP and the redistribution of the Title I funds, how has that been beneficial? How do you see that?
Well, the addition of the CEP schools did not impact us because we chose to use DC as our poverty measurement. Had we used free and reduced lunch, then it would have had a dramatic impact. The poorest schools would, of course, have remained the same. They would have lost anywhere from $25,000 to $60,000. But the schools that were in that middle band, they would have lost a lot because the schools that were at this lower part would have been bumped up into the middle band. So we chose to not use our free and reduced lunch, which we have used in the past, and we use direct certified.
Are there any other questions from our board members?
I do, Madam Chair. Dr. Artist, your slide that gave the percentages of poverty at the school I found was most interesting. North Drive Elementary being the highest level of poverty at 96.5%.
Yes, sir.
School of Engineering being the lowest at 16.7%. I have no other county information. Do you ever look at other counties and see if there's that much spread amongst their schools as there appears to be in Wayne County?
I have looked at the school systems adjoining us. When we were deciding, or when you were deciding, excuse me, whether we were going to add the additional schools for CEP, a lot of the research that I did was to see how this impacted. One of the things that we did, and I was not in charge of Title I then, but my predecessor did call several of the counties around us just to see if that poverty band was replicated and if it impacted. And while we don't know their specific percentages, we did get that it would impact in the same way. So I can assume from that information that the ranking is similar. In any community, you're going to have, especially if you have neighborhood schools, you're going to have schools that are very, very poor and then schools that are not. And so as long as the neighborhood feeds the school, then the economic status of the neighborhood is going to be reflected in that poverty percentage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think I had a couple questions relative to your expenditures. We just had a survey done not long ago to try to find out what might be some of interest to our teachers, particularly in our low-performing schools.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they came, I think there were 3 different things that really stood out. One was they needed more resources. 2, they said that they needed more behavioral support in their schools. Have we done anything since that survey came out to try to address those particular needs for those schools?
Actually, we have. We now have, as a part of our federal programs, a grant called Title IV. It came into fruition for Wayne County Public Schools in January of this year. That grant is designed to support 3 things. 1, safe and orderly schools. 2, well-rounded education. And 3, STEM. To address those 3 prongs in Wayne County at our 4, and I'll call them, I won't say our neediest, but our highest priority schools, Brogdon Primary, Brogdon Middle, Carver Heights, and Dillard. We were able to put in a quality professional. That person had to have at least 2 years of experience in behavioral support. In addition to that, we have got contracted services with Simplicity Counseling, and they go into those 4 schools once a week, and they provide small group, I don't want to call it counseling, but I'll say interaction, where they reteach the skills for socialization. They work with that QP. They use their positive behavior intervention support data, and those students who are referred most often, they work with the clinical social worker and with the QP. So that has been in place since January. We plan to repeat that at those same 4 schools again this school year, and I'm hoping to maybe expand to 2 other schools. We have a project that is set to launch from our Exceptional Children's Program that will also deal with mental health, so we don't want to replicate services. So right now, those schools were chosen because, number 1, they were SIG schools, and then number 2, they fed each other. So we have done that. In addition to that, we put in a lot of initiatives that would make the students become more engaged. We hired an artist in residence. They are at those 4 schools, and we were also able to put in some incentive type trips that were given to the students based on behavior. So we've done it at a small frame at those 4 schools, but our plan is we've gotten more Title IV money for this upcoming school year, so we're hoping to spread it out. Ms. Key has planned a workshop or a learning session with our elementary principals to see who's interested first, because I have found that if a principal does not buy into what you're doing or want it for their program, then it won't be successful there. Those 4 principals were very interested in having it there.
Second question I'd like to ask is relative to your incentives that you use with your SIG grants and things of that nature. I've noticed that a lot of times those incentives are tied to like growth. And therefore, many of our staff members do not actually get that incentive. Am I correct?
Correct.
Is there any possibility, since we have been talking about doing something for our low-performing teachers and things of that nature, is there any way that those funds can be diverted from an incentive such as that to some type of incentive to attract more qualified teachers in our low-performing schools?
The SIG grant has to stay true to what was put into the SIG grant, but in order to address what you've said there, both principals included in their amendments this year to provide a incentive for teachers who have high attendance, because we have found because those schools are challenging to work at, the teachers are often absent, so attendance rate for teachers, they can earn an incentive that way. Returning to the school, they can get a retention bonus. Those have been added in as well. Also, extensive professional development was done at both of those schools. If they attended all of the professional development and then did something, a reflective project, a capstone project that shows that they were not only attentive but engaged and also utilizing the skills, they were also able to get an incentive. So those are 3 other incentives that are not tied to growth that they are able to get.
Okay, and do you have anything on that same line? Because you said those were actually SIG funds, right?
Yes.
Does Title I offer anything of that?
You can use Title I funds for incentives. It's allowable. You can go back to that slide and see that. At the district level, we are not allowed to use any more than 5% of our district set aside for incentives. So if we were to do that, because it's not in our Title I plan now, what we would have to do would be to include it in there and then eliminate some of the things that we already have. We didn't get any more money this year in Title I. As a matter of fact, it was reduced, not significantly, but somewhat. And what we do is with those set-aside funds, we put some away for our priority schools and our focus schools. Last year, they were able to get a extra allotment to their Title I, and they were able to spend it as their school improvement directed them to. But each priority school and focus school got a $90,000 extra allotment. This year, we have chosen to have a roundtable discussion and actually talk with principals and see what they need and what they want. That money is still encumbered, but you don't want to just put money on a problem and we're up here in our ivory tower deciding how it should be used at the school level. Last year, like I said, we allotted the $90,000. They had to write a subsequent plan, then they spent that money. This year, I've encumbered that amount again, not quite as much as I did last year because Title I now has to cover some other expenses due to some state budget cuts. But we will have that discussion with them. We are meeting July 31st for a curriculum meeting, but it is our intent that afternoon to talk with principals then. Our Title I plan is due in CCP the first weeks of August, so we have just a few days to try to get that worked out.
Okay. The last question I'd like to ask you, relative to these different programs, Imagine Learning, Imagine Math, STEM Scope, Walking Classrooms, how do you go about evaluating the effectiveness of those programs in the schools?
If you'll recall, last year, Mr. Pridgeon asked us to do a program evaluation. I did a lot of research and designed a tool that we used, and we evaluated every program up on this list at every school. We got principal feedback, we got school improvement team feedback, we got parent feedback, and we got teacher feedback. The only feedback we didn't get, and Mr. Pridgeon pointed that out that day, was student feedback, and largely because a lot of these programs are implemented at the elementary level, and often you cannot get a genuine, valid answer about a program from a student. They will talk about the program they enjoy. So we wanted to get data from the actual people that were implementing the program. What we got from that report was they were satisfied with the program, but they were not satisfied with the professional development that they had had in conjunction with that program, and also along with the support. So to that end, one of the major programs, in that slide isn't up there, but is ClassWorks. It is at every school that is elementary and 3 of our middle schools. Ms. Key and Ms. Brown provided professional development with ClassWorks twice a month, every month last year, so that they could have better support. The same thing we did with Imagine Learning, and we were able to get the Hill Wrap, not at the level that we wanted it to, but at least 6 schools were trained so that they would have somebody on their staff that had those. So that's how we measure. Now, after this year, when we get the data from this EOG and this TRC and DIBELS, we will then juxtapose that against the data from last year, knowing that it will not singularly measure the programs, because they've had other things. They've had instruction. They've had, some of them have had Sylvan. Some of them have had a myriad of interventions. But what we can do is see the cohort of students that were in it at the beginning of the year and at the end, and then again at the beginning of the year, and triangulate that data.
And that data would not be based on any one particular program.
No, I can disseminate it through program. What I would do first would be to do it by program, and then do it by school, and then by county. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, if you could do that, I would greatly appreciate that.
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much. Job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have, for information only, the Wayne County Public School volunteer brochure. I would assume that that is Dr. Mason.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. You have before you, for information only, a brochure for that goes along with Board Policy 5015, School Volunteers. This brochure is in completion and provides guidelines for the 2018-19 school year for our upcoming volunteers that will be volunteering in our schools. This is an additional support piece for safety of our students, and it outlines the guidelines and the process for all of our school volunteers for the school year. As you see there, our volunteers this year will have a background check that they will be required to do so that they will be able to volunteer in our schools. That process will be placed online, and Mr. Dirksen will provide information to our parents online where to find that so that they can provide their information for that background check to complete the process. Once the parents have been provided that background check or provided that online, they will be mailed a badge in the mail, and that goes under the identification area that you see there. That they will wear that school badge so that the school principals and administration team will know that that background check has been completed. That badge will serve as their identification to serve as a school volunteer, having fulfilled those requirements. We only ask under your guidelines as the board that that background check is only completed one time for all families. They only have to complete a background check once. However, per board policy, volunteers are required to report to the central office or to the school principal within 24 hours if there are any reports or charges that they have to share with them as well, and that follows our board policy. This also provides information about current dress code, that we are also following Wayne County Public Schools staff dress code as well, and we do ask that our volunteers follow that dress code. So this is a informational flyer and brochure that will be provided on our website and shared with our volunteers with the guidelines that are in Board Policy 5015 for all school volunteers. And again, we will have a call out. Mr. Dirksen will share that with all parents as we begin our back to school so that they will know how to complete the online volunteer background check.
Mrs. Strickland?
I have a couple of grammatical questions and then just a general question.
Sure.
In the middle of page 1, under volunteer definitions and school volunteer, does that without still need to be hyphenated right before the word pay?
And it may be, this is your, is that?
That was the one that was submitted to the board.
Right, for information.
There's been some corrections.
There have been some.
All these weeks have been corrected since then.
Yes,
Okay.
because we did that in policy.
Well, there's a
I
second
remember that
question
one.
you may not have corrected because it may not have come up, and this was under column 3. And it may not need to be corrected, this is just me, gifts and compensation. When it points out, it says volunteers must refrain from giving students gifts, etc. Additionally, volunteers may not accept compensation from any third party or source, including but not limited to booster, parents, or other district support organizations for the performance of his or her official duties as a volunteer on behalf of the board. I'm getting bogged down a little bit with official duties and then as a volunteer on behalf of the board, because they're not, does it mean, are they not being given compensation from the board? Because the way it reads to me, it could be that the Booster Club wants to provide gas money for one of their volunteers to go to playoffs. Can they not accept that? Do you,
I see what you're saying.
Do you see where I'm at?
I do.
if there's any way to kind of tweak that so where if a booster club or PTO wants to compensate somebody for an event, right here it looks like we've limited them.
But they probably would need.
Well, they'd have to do it through the school.
Right, they would. That would go back to the school.
But how would anybody know that? Do you see, it's got to somehow be clarified somewhere. Somebody's got to know. So I don't know if we put it in a booster club policy or
And I'm assuming that we may have to look at our booster, what our policy may be for that.
But I would like to know, why do they have to transport? Because we have buses that go to playoff games.
They may not. They may be carrying equipment. That was just the quickest thing I could come up with. But there's so many situations where, obviously you're not going to have the local PTO pay for everybody to, drive their car on a field trip. But you may have a situation, I picked up concrete one day. I would have never accepted payment for gas, but what if somebody wanted to pay me for gas? I don't know, but there's going to be situations where somebody in high school may want to, and it reads to me like they can't say it's from the board, obviously, because we're not compensating it. But are we not allowing a booster club to offer a compensation?
Let me address that. I'll give you a
Mr.
classic
Smith.
example.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Sure.
Mr. Smith?
I will defer to Mr. Pritchett since his
Okay.
motor's running.
Thank you.
That's why I hesitated.
I'll give you a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Okay.
I was involved with Booster Club, for Choral Booster Club at Eastern Wayne High School, and they had children that went to the state event, or the state, all-state course. Okay? And the Booster Club actually helped defer the expenses of the children that went and stayed in motel rooms, and they also helped to pay for fuel at the time on that trip. okay? Because you've basically got 3 students or 4 students that are going, and their parents and music teacher are taking them, okay? And they're staying overnight in a hotel room, and then they're performing, okay? That's along the lines of what you were talking about.
Correct.
And it has been done in the past in the circumstances like that. However,
By
I
this
will tell
policy,
you,
that can't be done.
Madam Chair.
however, I will tell you that the Booster Club was dissolved and made a part of the school. At that time, it was a totally separate account, and now it's an account at the school.
All right, let me let the attorney go.
It seems to me you're talking about 2 different things. You're talking about gifts or compensation, but what you're really talking about is reimbursement for actual expenses, I think.
Right, well, and it
So-
says they may not receive any sort of compensation. And so
Well, I think you could clarify this easily if you put in, this does not include reimbursement for actual expenses.
something like that,
Okay.
because it's not a gift at that point, it's a reimbursement.
It's a reimbursement.
Okay, so that was 2 of my 3. My last one is the dress code for somebody on a field trip. How does a principal, does a principal have to police his chaperones on a field trip to be in school dress code?
And I think that was addressed in the policy committee meeting where we talked about certain things. Field day, we know there's certain things that might be hot, or, certain people may have certain things on. But I think that would be up to the principal to share what the requirements may be within dress code. I think that
So
they
just
would
as they
need to-
can waive Blue Jean Friday,
Sure.
or they can waive
Absolutely.
Field Day, as long as we're communicating that to the principal.
Yes.
Because I understand the spirit of this is somebody that's volunteering in a classroom,
Mm-hmm.
or someone that's volunteering in the office, but that's not what it says.
Right.
So
That's
as long
right.
as we're communicating that
Right, that's right.
to the
That's right.
principals, then I am golden.
And we
with
discussed
this.
that in the policy committee meeting. Field day may have a different type of dress code from a regular school day. Right.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
My question is directed towards the attorney. The statement under gifts and compensation, the last sentence, where it refers to official duties as a volunteer on behalf of the board. Are volunteers acting on behalf of the board? Are we liable for what volunteers do?
We're responsible for our volunteers, which is one of the reasons why we screen them. And we'd have potential liability depending upon what they're doing, how they're doing it, and so on. And they're covered under our insurance policy.
Okay, so they are acting in official capacity?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how we govern their dress?
Yeah. And to the extent that we're not covered by insurance, we have sovereign immunity.
Say again?
To the extent that we're not covered by insurance, we have immunity.
Okay.
So when we refer to a volunteer, that's anybody that's not an employee of Wayne County Public Schools.
Yes, that's correct.
Anybody,
Yes,
no matter what role they're in.
yes.
Because I've had some questions to me about, like, Boosters Club people and people who work in concession stands and stuff like that, so.
Yes, sir. They are all volunteering as well, and they would also follow this process as well, because they are around students.
So who at the school site is going to be responsible for reporting all that information to central office to make sure that we've got every volunteer
Right.
screened or whatever?
So that's why we're working in conjunction with Mr. Dirkskin. If you want to talk a little bit about what we have done in partnership with him and how this process is going to work. We do have on-site volunteer coordinators as well that we have also discussed this process. So I'll let Ken talk a little bit about that.
And pretty much what happens is the person who wants to volunteer at a school, they have to first apply online, and they have to go through the background check, and then from that point, HR handles the background check. Information that goes through the volunteer applications forwarded directly to the volunteer coordinator at the school. Essentially what happens is this is going to be a cultural shift. what happens a lot of times is, especially when you look at testing, well, we know next week we're having testing, so we need to get proctors in place. And sometimes there might be some last minute planning. What's going to happen now is we're asking schools to think a little bit differently about their volunteers. If they know 6 months from now they got testing, let's go ahead and have them do their background checks, go ahead and be approved. And once you do that one-time check and application, you can go ahead and be used as a volunteer any point throughout the year. And correct me if I'm wrong, once you go through the background check, you're automatically checking that regularly. So that's the purpose. You only have to do it once. So next year, if they've already gone through the background check, you're in the system. One of the goals with this is to help our schools better identify who's in their buildings. We know that we have booster clubs. We know there's people coming into the Friday night events. But the hopes is that we know who those folks are, because these are the people who are around our children. And we want to make sure that we have done everything we can do to protect our children and our school communities by asking everybody to go through this process. And that's going to fall back on your principal and your school volunteer coordinator to make sure that they're also communicating information to all of their athletic directors, their coaches, their extracurricular clubs, and those that are doing field trips.
The problem is going to be that I see, and I mean, I think it's a great idea, but the problem is going to be sometimes it's difficult at best to get volunteers. And if we're working at the last minute, if we got a basketball game on a Friday night and all of a sudden they don't have anybody show up, you know, we've got, I don't see where, I mean, it's going to take a lot of planning to get every volunteer screened.
Absolutely. And again, that's where that cultural shift is coming in. And we're sending home information with every single parent at the beginning of the school. So everybody's going to have this brochure. Everybody's going to understand the process. At the beginning of the athletic season, this is information I can communicate with all the parents, all of the booster club volunteers that have served in this role for years. These are the folks that are coming back. We know we're going to have them. It's the ones that who may be new to the school, who's never gone through this process. We want to make sure all of the onboarding as a parent comes into the school is aware of how they can help their child in the classroom. And the hope is that these schools can use this information in this program as a catalyst to get more volunteers in a school. Hey, look at this program we have in place. What can we do to help get you into the school? And we hear, at least at my level, different community organizations, how can we partner with the schools? Well, this is a simple way we can do that. Go ahead and apply to be a volunteer, and let's get you connected with schools that are needing those additional supports.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and it's you know, simple probably is not a good word because it's not going to be simple. But I can tell you one of the questions that's already been directed at me was, okay, a volunteer, and this is coming from an organization that uses volunteers, a volunteer is no different than anybody else that walks through the gates of a football game or a basketball game. If we're their argument is, you know, they're sitting there, that same student is in the company of a complete stranger with people we don't know roaming around them. I'm just telling you what they've already asked me about it. So my response to them was anybody who works at a school and provides a service through the school and is affiliated with the school, that's what we consider a volunteer. We can't test everybody or screen everybody that walks in the gate of a football game or a basketball game. Their argument is they're just as endangered by a spectator as they would be a volunteer.
And that's a law enforcement matter. The reality is we're required by law to background check all of our volunteers, and we have to have an organized way to do it.
I'm just telling you, we probably need to be ready to answer those questions.
And the hope is that the schools can see this as a positive, and that our parents' communities can see this as a positive, because these are the people that are working directly with our children, and we need to do everything in our power to protect our children.
Mr. Dirksen and Dr. Mason, are we going to have these brochures available to be passed out at the schools? I know a lot of schools will have open house, and someone representing the volunteer coordinator, as you say, may have a booth and a sign-up sheet giving them specific ways in which we need volunteers, and parents can sign up.
Absolutely.
And then take this with them.
And that is the goal, is to have this brochure ready to go home at open house.
Okay.
And of course, information will be communicated with parents via the call system and social media. The main thing we want to do is get through this particular board meeting and share this information with you, make sure everybody's on the same page, and if there's clarifications that need to be made, that we can do that before we start communicating information out to the public.
And it's gonna take time to move from what we have been doing to what we need to do.
Absolutely.
So, but I think it's gonna go, because see, I see that as a spectator, and a spectator is not a volunteer to me. Volunteer is somebody that's working in that concession stand, with students, and they might be raising money for their club, or for athletics itself. And that parent is in charge and overseeing what is done. So that's the role I see of a volunteer, not someone that's paying to come into the game.
And the nice thing is we have consistent guidelines from one school to the next.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Would it be out of order to call for a motion or a second or vote on the drug policy that we're just got presented to, in case, I mean, I know we've got to go to policy and come up with a policy, but pending the policy, just to see if we have the support to move forward with it?
Well, are we in a position to do that? Is that what they were expecting tonight?
Well, I don't know, I'm just saying, if we're going to,
Dr. Dunsmore?
I think it was more information to the board. I think, and help me out here, Mr. Schwartz, we haven't approved the agenda for board action. I think is probably to get things rolling, we're going to have to get that to policy, but I think a board vote to have us start working on that would probably move things along.
because really, if the board is not in favor of it, we're wasting our time spending any time on trying to develop a policy for it.
Well, you get into budgeting questions too.
Yes,
Do we have the
yeah.
funds? There's a lot of different factors, so should the vote be something to the effect of, are we interested in pursuing?
Well, what about that?
You could certainly add that to the agenda tonight, just to get a sense of the board, and then decide whether to refer it to policy. We've done a lot of work on drug testing policies with a lot of other districts, and have a lot of policy information, forms, background recommendations we could help you with too.
And we could also work with Mr. Hayes and get a sample budget based on the numbers for the variety, if that's the direction the board wishes to go.
Okay, so what we want to do is add it under board action?
So then, Madam Chair, if you would, the board action, the approval of the agenda, we would need to add that as item J.
With consideration of drug testing program?
Consideration, yes.
Should the same thing be done about the demographic study?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same
I mean,
thing.
since we're doing it.
Would you like an item,
Item K.
item K? Madam Chairman, the only other thing I would like to add, I apologize, I had it down as item J, I will K, L, I will be item L. If we could please, that I could add a special called board meeting for August 10th. I'm opening at starting times. I'd recommend 9 in the morning if we could, just to any last minute personnel items needed to get school opened up, so we can make sure the board is aware of all those changes prior to bringing the students back.
Is the 10th a Friday?
It is.
Yes, it is. That
Yes, it is.
Friday, August 10th at 9 a.m.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to ask for clarification on the agenda.
All right.
And it's relative to our policies. We have this under consent agenda, but I thought that we had had some discussion at the last board meeting that we wanted to pull policies out of consent agenda, particularly if they were first readings, because most of the time with the consent agenda, you're motioning to approve those policies.
Well, I think what was, someone correct me if I'm wrong, in policy meeting, did we not agree that we would have just we would allow to pull this time if there was a concern about a first reading? I think what we want to do is block off the first readings altogether and block off the second readings and handle it that way. So it will be easier to pull if you need to.
Well, see, normally we don't take any kind of vote on the first reading.
See, I think last meeting we
But you
did have
can
a
pull it
couple of
for
things that
discussion,
we.
that's what it's there for.
Yeah, but if you don't call it for discussion and
You
you
can do it
vote on
again.
it, then you're approving it.
Now you're
For a
approving it
first
to
reading.
move forward to the second reading.
You're only approving it to move forward to the second reading. You're not approving it as a final approval, but to move forward into second reading. So if you have no discussion, you wouldn't pull it. But it is a matter of the board. If you all want us to separate out and each policy and vote on it individually, that has to be a call from the board. And I know that there was a statement made at the last board meeting, and we did discuss it in policy. But it's not a call from policy, it really is a call from the full board.
Well, if I could speak out, my preference would be to have any policy that is a first reading be under general, and any policy that we would be going through for a second reading would then go under consent agenda.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
You can do that. Generally, if you got a matter that's coming from a committee, it wouldn't then also go before the full board first time around, because that kind of defeats the purpose of having the committee. So this is coming to the board on first reading from the committee. That's why it's not under general. But again, it's completely up to the board how you want to handle it.
Well, now, when we vote to accept the consent agenda, are we actually voting to send it for a second reading, or are we voting to approve it at that time?
You're voting to accept it on first reading. You're not voting to approve it or do anything else as a final matter, because your policy requires 2 readings.
Right.
And approval on a second reading.
Okay.
All right, now, are these first readings because of the opening of school? Are they to come up tonight and we are asking for a vote on them?
For
Okay.
approval.
For approval.
Yeah, because some of them were time sensitive to the beginning of school.
So now how do we want to handle that? Would it be under the consent, or do we want to handle them individually?
Give me 1 second here.
All right. Yes, sir.
I know that we'll get to that, but I'd like to ask the board and superintendent if they might, on that August the 10th meeting, consider doing it at 9:30. I have a very important doctor's appointment that morning.
So let me ask one question.
And I will not be able to be here at 9.
Before we decide, I mean, I know we've already decided on that, but is there any way, would the 9th work better for anybody?
I won't be here.
Because I won't be here the 10th. I know that's my fault, Madam Chair.
Yes. We were trying to,
Mr. Flower said he won't be here either the 9th or the 10th.
Can we back it up to Wednesday?
Big pardon?
Can't do that.
Mr.
Well, I was
Lewis?
gonna wait and discuss it when it come back up, but, you know.
We'll just discuss it.
okay, let's wait, all right, so
Madam
that
Chair?
we can decide what we're gonna do.
Okay,
Yes,
I don't know what was intended from the policy committee on some of these policies. In the expanded agenda, it says, for example, under, on the consent agenda, under 5J, policy 1510, school safety first reading, the recommended action is recommended to the board for first reading for an immediate vote. Was
Yes.
that intended to approve it based on one vote, that is waive the second reading so that this can immediately be implemented? Was that the intent?
yes, that was the intent for the
Okay.
first readings this month. The intent was to get it passed by the board so we could be prepared for the opening of school, going into handbooks and other materials that would be passed out to students within those first days.
Well, Madam Chair, could we get Dr. Mason to clarify the urgency or the time sensitivity of the ones that we did decide to just vote first reading and see if we could get them approved? If you would, I think that would be good.
There's
Because I don't remember how many there were. There was more than one.
J.
And the non-school material, Q,
S, T.
S, and T.
So for clarification purposes, In the policy committee meeting, we discussed the J, policy 1510, school safety, and that was also sent to principals to review so that they would have an understanding about school safety as well. And we recommended that for a immediate action on tonight. The student dress code, L, policy 4305, student dress code as well because of the beginning of school. M, policy 5015, school volunteers. Distribution and display of non-school materials, policy 5210.
That's O.
And O, yes, O and the ARP, letter P, as well as Q, policy 7300, Q and R with the AR 7300, staff responsibilities, and the employee code of excellence, AR, because of the opening of school. Policy 8221, letter S, school-sponsored fundraising, because of the opening of school, as well as T, U, and V, which are all the AR, but go under policy 8260, which is crowdsourcing because of the opening of school.
Okay, Madam Chair, in that case, you're going to need a motion to waive board policy requiring 2 readings for those items. That'll require a 2/3 vote. If it's approved, then you can approve each of these items on first reading.
All right.
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion that we waive our board policy and go ahead and take a vote on the first readings that have been mentioned.
I second.
And that would be for items 5J, L, M, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, and V.
Yes. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, moving forward, I mean, I'm good with this tonight. That's just our committee. But moving forward, if the administration can let the entire board know when this comes out that they would like to pass it that night, to be completely honest and candid with you, things that are a second reading, I read them and study them a lot harder than I do things that are a first reading, because obviously I came here tonight not anticipating or not knowing that you're going to want to pass this tonight. So if the administration can give us more information on that in the future, it would be helpful.
And let me just say this, Madam Chair, if you will.
Yes.
Thank you. It wasn't all, I mean, that was a collective discussion between the committee and Dr. Mason. I mean, I think we all arrived at that decision together or request together.
Yes, we did.
I mean, it wasn't all just Dr. Mason's request, because we just looked at the policies we were dealing with and the fact that we were fixing to begin school, and these policies all greatly affected the school day from the very first day, so.
Yes, that's correct.
Madam Chair.
But I think, yes, sir.
I was just going to say, I can't ever recall a single year before school starts that we haven't had to vote on some first policies, especially because of student handbooks having to be printed and other factors involved. I was fully expecting us to probably after reading these, to probably have to vote on them tonight, so.
And I think we can just write a statement beside those that are first reading that we would like to have approval that night. So that would be simple enough. But all in favor of waiving board policy for our first read, show by raising your right hand. Any opposed? Okay. We have one opposed. Ms. Anderson. All right, now we need to go back and approve the agenda. All right.
You need a motion to, because those are going to be on the consent agenda. You need a motion to approve the agenda with the, as presented, with the additions of items 4J, which will be consideration of drug testing program, 4K, consideration of demographic study, and 4L, special board meeting in August.
Okay, yes. All right, I need a motion to approve the agenda, which includes consideration of the drug testing program, consideration of the demographics study, and for a special call board meeting to be held August.
Sometime in August.
In August. You're going to have discussion on that.
All right, we'll have discussion in August at 9:30 a.m.
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion that we add to the agenda items J, K, and L, as you just mentioned, for the purpose of voting on those tonight.
Okay, I need a second.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Is this the time for us to discuss the date of the board meeting?
No, when you get up to 4L.
Okay, when we get up to L, okay. All right, all those in favor of the approval of the agenda as stated, please show by raising your right hand. Any opposed? Mr. Henderson, did you? Okay, all right. He, include Mr. Henderson, he voted for it. All right, thank you. We need a motion to approve the minutes of the May 29th board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed? All right. We need a motion for the approval of closed session minutes to be opened,
Ms. Burke,
unless there was a reason not to.
would it be out of order for me to make a motion to approve 4C, D, and E? With the opening of the closed session meetings on C and E? Or do we really need to go through one at a time? Just a question for in the future.
You could make a motion to approve them all with the closed session minutes on C and E.
Being released, is that?
Yeah, they can both be released.
Okay, that is my motion then. I'd like to make a motion that we approve C, D, and E with the closed session meetings minutes being released.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed? Okay. Wayne County Board of Trustee appointment, Dr. Dunsmore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We received a letter from Dr. Walker. One of our recommendations on the Board of Trustees was cycling off this period. I went out and met with Dr. Walker, and they were asking that we make a recommendation to replace that position. They also asked me about Ms. Wanda Nieves, who recently retired from Wayne County Public Schools. They were looking for somebody that was bilingual, and she had expressed interest. And I thought that was a wonderful idea and told him I would bring that to the board tonight so she could be seated on the Board of Trustees at the Community College.
Do we have to open this up any further, or can we go with this recommendation?
Don't we have to wait
You've got a board policy on this.
Don't we have to wait a month before we can approve that?
I believe you do.
Well, that's
What we did last time.
Yeah, I believe you got a board.
30 days.
30 days, yes.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to change that then, Madam Chair, that was a recommendation out of the community college. We will make sure that's advertised, and I will bring that back at the next board meeting.
Okay.
I mean, if there's anybody else that's.
Yeah. Or anybody else that you all want to make a recommendation, please let me know.
All right.
And your recommendation is for Ms. Wanda?
Nieves. She just retired from Wayne County Public Schools. All right, and the next is custodial service district-wide. This is Dr. Tim Harrell.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Dunsmore,
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I have a couple items on the agenda, just so everyone knows. So item number G, H, and I are coming from the Facilities Committee as I discuss these topics, Madam Chairman, so you know about those.
Okay.
The first item on the agenda is discussing our custodial bids, looking at bidding out custodial or accepting a proposal that has been given to us for the entire district for custodial services. To bring the full board up to speed to make sure we're all on the same page as we discuss this item, I'd like to give you just a little bit of background or history because I know every board member is not privileged all the time of sitting with the Facilities Committee as we discuss these items. So this has been discussed in the Facilities Committee for some time now. The conversation started for a couple reasons when I came on board, and it probably was discussed before I came on board. One of those reasons is to establish a uniform expectation from building to building of what we would like to see our buildings in cleanliness and being taken care of. That's one thing that was very evident that we needed to establish. As well as we would like to eliminate the struggle that our principals and HR staff is having right now with trying to hire custodial staff. We still currently have some vacancies across our county, and we're struggling to fill those. Also, we looked at reducing the amount the district is spending on custodial services, and that includes specifically looking at custodial supplies. We have a strong feeling that we can save on our custodial supplies. We currently are buying a lot of custodial supplies that are ready to mix items. So I would potentially say that would be like buying Roundup from Walmart or from Lowe's. You're buying a lot of water versus the concentrate forms. We buy things ready to mix. So from there, just to give you an idea of how this process has worked, so we're all again on the same page, we did a request for proposal in RFP that was issued back on April 19th of this year. And so you can see that as I discuss it in the manila folder you have. I just gave you a copy of the RFP. It is public knowledge, and page 5 has the request that we put out for specific custodial services. So as we have this discussion and look at what we originally requested, that would be page 5 as the vendors put their proposal together for us. So we received 3 bids when this RFP was presented. We opened those bids on May 10th of 2018. From there, we went, of course, to Facilities Committee on May 22nd. And out of Facilities Committee, from the 3 vendors that gave us proposals, Facilities Committee narrowed those proposals down to 2 that they asked for me to contact personally and to invite them in to do presentations for the Facilities Committee. Those presentations took place on June 20th here at the Board of Education with the Facilities Committee. It's also my understanding that I believe the Finance Committee has discussed this a little bit as well. So it has been discussed in Finance as well as in the Facilities Committee. So at the July 16th Facilities Committee, there was a motion to send this matter to the full board from the facilities for approval and discussion if desired. The Facilities Committee motioned to recommend awarding High Standard Cleaning the contract for custodial services county-wide. So just to look a little bit at the numbers so we're all understanding exactly what we're discussing or talking about there. So again, page 5 is the RFP, and you can look as we put this together what we asked each vendor to look at when they were putting their proposal together for us. The vendors were also given opportunities within the timeline to call, ask questions, and then we were required within that timeline to provide answers back to them based on what they had asked us to do. So here's where we are today. So for 2018-19, the school year, we're budgeted to spend $5,133,000 for custodial services. This includes $650,000 of that for cleaning supplies. This also includes wages and benefits for 99 employees currently. High Standard has proposed to provide services to all of our campuses in the amount of $4,445,075. This includes supplies and the needed equipment they would use. That's a cost savings of $687,925 over what we're currently budgeted to spend. Now this figure does include 40 day porters that would remain employees of Wayne County Public Schools. It includes 40 day porters currently that would remain employees of Wayne County Public Schools. So also, as you'll see on the agenda, one of the next items that I have that I will discuss as we put this one to rest, or I have action on this one, we'll be looking at grounds crews and grounds proposals. I'll discuss that. One of the things that we can factor in is we're looking at 12 positions and 3 crews for grounds crews to try and improve and we could potentially pick up some of our employees that may be displaced from custodial services on our grounds crews as well. We also currently have 4.5 vacancies in our custodial services at this time. The remaining employees that we would have left would have the opportunity for consideration of employment with High Standard. High Standard currently pays an hourly wage of $17.25 an hour. At our last meeting, Mr. Pridgeon brought up some concerns that he had about a concern that was expressed to him about High Standard. I did investigate that and try to do due diligence for you, Mr. Pridgeon, to get some information on that. I spoke with Dr. Cox. Dr. Cox informed me that her main concern that she had right now was she has some custodial vacancies, and she and I talked about grass mowing, and she has one custodian she's been working with that's been doing everything for her, so she's been struggling to find someone. She had a concern that if there were any concerns with High Standard, it was not brought to her. The only thing that she mentioned was that she had a concern for the summer cleaning, that since that building is two-story, there was a little bit too much water used on the top floor and it leaked through. And then she had some concern with trash cans, but she said other than that, she didn't have any other concerns. So as we begin this discussion, I go back full circle to where we started. So as we started this discussion, when I came on board and began sitting with the Facilities Committee, we started this discussion because we had a very evident concern about our buildings and where we are with how they look across the district, and trying to establish that uniform expectation. You'll probably get tired of hearing me say that over hopefully the years I get to serve Wayne County Public Schools, but trying to establish a uniform expectation where when we walk, regardless of the building, regardless of the age, when we step in the door, the expectation of cleanliness for our children is the same from school to school. Also, because of that struggle again during the HR process of trying to make sure we have those qualified people, as well as looking at reducing the costs that we're paying for our custodial services overall. As we move forward with this, one of the things that we have as we move forward is obviously this is a proposal to move forward with them. The contract would be an evolving contract, meaning I see my role as working with support services to make sure that we tailor this contract to what we need. And also, it is not a stand-back contract where we sign it and I do not look. The expectation is that I maintain monitoring on these schools and what is being done. And if we are dissatisfied, I come back to Dr. Dunsmore, of course, and then to you based on the level of service that is provided to us. So that's a lot of information that I have shared with you. I know you probably would like to have some discussion or some questions about it. Again, this comes to you from the Facilities Committee as a motion to approve High Standard cleaning for contracted services.
Mr. Flowers?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we approve the contract with High Standard, one-year contract for the custodial services district-wide.
I'd like to second that.
All right. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Good. Mr. Smith?
Okay, Dr. Harold, one of the things that comes to mind, I hear you say that there's going to be a day porter that will be employed and maintained by the school system. What will the day porter's duties and responsibilities be?
We currently have a couple of day porters throughout the district, Mr. Smith, so those day porter responsibilities will be pretty much the same as a normal custodian, except my goal is to not have them mow grass. We have day porters currently that are mowing grass, and to be very honest with you, I know I'm jumping the gun, but that is causing some issues of those men and women to complete their duties during the day as the principal needs them. So obviously those general things that would be maintenance, spills, those things need to be cleaned up, making sure the halls are swept in between class changes to keep the dirt off the floor. And we would have a list of items. To be quite honest with you, whatever we move forward with this, I do plan on meeting with our custodial staff and Mr. Ashford to discuss our custodial duties in general to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, and in addition to that, some of the intangibles that custodians currently bring to the table as they are employees of the school system and they work directly under the supervision of the principal, which the dynamics will change once we go into contract. Those intangibles being things like working ball games and opening up for different events in the evening and those types of things.
Right.
Will those things continue? How will that change, if at all?
Yes, so as far as athletic purposes go, I think our principals probably would enjoy this because in the contract, High Standard would clean our athletic facilities. Because I know as a principal, I struggled at Southern Wayne High School trying to clean that gym. And to be honest with you, our kids did it. The next morning PE class, they spent the time cleaning that. Our day porters might be required, obviously are asked by the principal within their scope of duties to open up a facility or a building. Now, within this scope for high standard cleaning, part of their responsibilities is to secure our buildings as they are there to clean and make sure the buildings are in their shape they're supposed to be. One of the things we're looking at is when we look at retaining 40 is looking at retaining of our 40 best employees. I know that we have some performance concerns of some of our staff in some of our areas that may be struggling and we may need to provide some help or assistance to, I'll phrase it that way, in getting their job done.
Well, how many positions do we have? Because I was in the finance committee this month. And we really did have a strong concern about not releasing those day porters for work at the school. So how many do we have?
Yes, ma'am. We currently have 99 custodial staff members, and we have about 4.5 vacancies at this time. So looking at moving in 40 with the lawn care crew, we would retain 52 of those staff members, and then the other staff members that we did not retain would eventually, hopefully, have the opportunity to be picked up by High Standard working for them. Now, their hourly rate is actually higher than what we pay our custodial staff.
Well, let me ask a question, Ms. Burden. Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead on.
I didn't know, I thought you were through.
He might be able to answer my question through yours, because
I just wonder if we think that, and I know what you're trying to do, and I'm all for saving money, but I don't want to cut. When we have kids in a building, my question is one day porter going to be enough to service a principal's needs that has 700 or 800 kids in a building?
And you're correct, Mr. West, because one of the things we'll have to look at is it may vary based on the size of our school. So a school like Charles B. Aycock or Roseboro High School might not be able to get by with one day porter. So they may need two. In some of our schools that are being cleaned right now, we do have 2 day porters in place. And again, not to harp back on it, I know as I've talked to our principals, our day porters right now are currently struggling because they're mowing grass as well as trying to maintain the building as well. So you are correct, sir. We may have to end up looking and tailoring, looking at our buildings. A small school might just need 1, where a school that is as large as our high schools might need 2.
Because you take an elementary school that may have 600 or 700, 800 kids. You know, we've got a lot of elementary kids in that building that are going to be having some things that happen during the day, and it's going to be, I shouldn't say it, but in my opinion, it's going to be virtually impossible for one person to service the needs of a principal. Even a school that's got, you take an elementary school that's got 300 or 400 students, it's the same concept. I mean, so I don't know, we may, and I think we can probably still find a way to save a significant amount of money, but we may have to look at putting more than just one day porter into the buildings.
Right.
And I know that maybe defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do to some extent, but I think there's going to be a need for that. I just don't think one person will be able to serve a building.
Right. And remember, as we, and I do not disagree, as we refocus, remember this conversation started because that standard is not there, and we have some issues that we need to address, and we've struggled in certain places with staffing and maintaining some of these individuals. And we want to get all on the same page, whereas, as I have stressed, when we walk into our buildings, cleanliness is not an issue for our children and our young people.
Are we guaranteed that 40 or 50 some of this 99 will be hired by High Standard?
No, ma'am. So we would retain, so to make sure we're on the same page, Ms. Burton, out of those 99, we would retain around 40 of those. And depending on what Mr. West says, we might have to adjust that number potentially depending on the size of our schools. So 40 is a ballpark number from there. And then out of that, we're looking at potentially 12, as I discussed the next topic, that could slide over to our grounds crews, because we're very well leveraged to move into that very effectively. And then, so that would leave us at least 52, so those remaining employees would have the opportunity to be interviewed and potentially be hired by Mr. Meadows for high standard cleaning.
So otherwise, are they going to be terminated?
Yes, ma'am, my understanding is then we would have our RIF policy that would come into place for that. Do you have a?
Yes, Mr. Smith.
In that same vein, looking at that possibility, what incentive would we have to offer those individuals? We've already stated that HSC is going to pay more per hour. What incentive would I have as a custodian to not jump ship and go with HSC and choose WCPS? Are we prepared to look at our pay structure as well to be competitive? Are we looking at our benefit package? What are we looking at as an incentive?
Right. That's a good question, Mr. Smith. Obviously, I'm not prepared to answer that question for you. I mean, logically, I would think that salary would be a big part of hiring effective people as we look at every position across our district. Just being very honest with you, but I'm not prepared to answer that question for you tonight.
I think benefits would be one.
I can research that for you.
Okay.
If you would like for me to.
Please do.
I will.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Harrell, I apologize, I had not had a chance to get together with you. I did speak with teachers, and I had, we could have the opportunity to meet, and I had one in particular that said that they would meet, but they were going on vacation for 10 days, and then I was
Yes,
going on
sir.
vacation. And I told you when I got back, we could meet, but I also asked that not principals, but teachers be surveyed as to their satisfaction with high standard cleaning. We haven't conducted a survey of such. And I'll reiterate again, I feel like it could be done on SurveyMonkey or whatever. You send an email and ask the teachers to do it. I know you'd have some participate and some not participate. But I think we would get a better sense of what the individual classroom teachers' satisfactions are with the performance of high standard in their classrooms.
And I do not disagree with you, Mr. Pridgeon. To give a little history on high standard that might be a concern for me as I step in this position, is high standard has currently been working for us for 2 years. And to be very honest with you, I did not hear Mr. Sauls before me or in 2 years, any complaints or dissatisfaction. Of course, I did not ask Mr. Sauls in that time if he had any concerns, but I know they've been providing services for us for 2 years.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
First of all, I think one of the problems that we might have been running into regarding our custodial staff is training. What kind of training do we currently provide our custodial staff?
None.
None.
No, sir.
But yet and still, we have a high expectation without telling them exactly what they need to do.
I have a high expectation.
I come from a staff development background.
Right.
And with staff development, it tells me that if they're not getting training, there's very limited things that you can expect of them. So I think that is one of the problems that we've been faced with. But I would also say that Dr. Dunsmore asked me at I think it was at the administrative retreat, principals retreat, to go around and talk with some of the principals who are using high standards right now. And the ones that I spoke with were not very favorable. And then the second thing they said is if we have a woman that is a janitor, sometimes that can create even more problems for you with the things that they have to do. So I'm not in favor of this contract at all. I'll just be blunt.
Ms. Strickland.
Some things that I just want to bring up. I've only been on the board 3.5 years, but when I first came on the board, one of the first things I actually noticed was, I think probably before I was on the board, it was just as a mom at Rosewood Elementary. And I feel like the janitorial staff at Rosewood Elementary does a complete bang-up job. It is amazing out there. It looks wonderful. I do know some days I have to be careful when I walk down the hallways where they may have just, done some sort of a larger maintenance, and so the kids have to be very careful because the work is being done during the day when the students are there. And then there was a fall festival at one of the other schools that was built up that was about the same time as Rosewood Elementary, and I walk in and it is filthy. It's not a little bit dirty, it's filthy. And it just so happens that our main maintenance worker or janitorial staff at Rosewood was attending the same festival, and he's walking around mortified at what he is seeing at this other school. And that might have been before I was on the board because the kids were kind of small. But it was what you're talking about. There's not the same standard at the schools, is that one concern. That secondary concern is that a lot of these larger jobs are being done when the students are in the building. And so for the safety of the children being in there, that's one of the reasons why I like the idea of an after-hours cleaning company coming in. It also allows your day porters more time to actually help the principal and the teachers if they need to move tables, set up for assemblies, take care of the kid that, mom sent to school sick. So it frees up that time. They're not having to do that maintenance in the day. So financing is a huge issue at over $600,000 that we really need to look at and saving taxpayer money. But something else that needs to be pointed out is that the janitorial staff at the different schools have different things that they have to accomplish. And I have heard the story, and I don't know if Dr. Dunsmore wants to rat out which school it was or not, but there was a school that the staff was told to do A through Z every day. And every day that man would come in and he would start with A and start working down. Well, he might get to about D or, and that's about as far as he'd get. And the next day he'd come in and he'd start right at that top again. Well, this was the exact same school that when they went to move the tables out of the lunchroom, you couldn't because they had been waxed to the floors. You couldn't move the money receptacle because it was waxed to the table. I think it's critical not only that we do have training for the 40 or so that we keep, but I think because High Standard has done such a good job catching us up from some of the bad stuff we've been in. A one-year contract is perfect. We get to see what they can do. If they knock it out of the ballpark, great, we go forward. If they don't, then we reassess. But getting these larger projects done after hours away from the students with a consistent standard across the county, I feel is critical, as well as saving the money to the taxpayers.
As Ms. Strickland pointed out, it's my understanding, of course, before me, that High Standard was brought in several years ago because we were behind in some of our schools and we were not able to catch up to a standard. And in those schools, my understanding is they have improved over what the condition was when they came in to do those buildings. Mr. Henderson, the only way that I can address your concern, that I would with any concern, is part of my responsibility in this position and putting it on my shoulders is I would be responsible for that. I do not believe currently that anyone, the way our contract is currently structured and not past is past, but I'm not sure if anyone has followed up to make sure things are done. The old principal in me makes sure what gets monitored gets done, and those things have to be monitored to make sure they get done. And with anything, just like as I will speak about the grounds crews in a little bit, make sure they get done, and me reporting back to Dr. Dunsmore what's going on in those situations.
Mr. Smith?
Okay, very good, Dr. Harold. That High Standard is actually, make sure we're on one accord. High Standard is not my issue. My issue is what the principals would be losing.
Right.
And that's my focus. I don't think there's any issue for me as far as what High Standard brings to the table. But I do know that principals rely heavily on their custodial staff for those non-tangible things that are not part of their daily job description.
I have not surveyed the principals or spoke to them individually. I can tell you that when I spoke to the principals at the retreat and spoke to them corporately about our proposal that was coming tonight and our proposal for grounds, I got applauses.
Okay.
Now, I did not address, Mr. Smith, your direct concern about what those intangibles that they might would bring if there's a few of those people that are not with us anymore. I did not specifically address that. I can tell you the principals appeared to be happy to see that we might be moving in a direction that helps them with their buildings.
Okay.
As I understand, the way I foresee this happening is that, okay, we got 99 employees currently. We're going to retain like 40, maybe more, depending on the size of the school. The way I see this happening is those day porters, they're going to come to the school in the morning, and the school's going to be clean. What we have now, we got 99 people, and they go to school, and the school is not clean. They have to clean the school and then address any other thing that might come up with the principal during the day. Well, the way I see this happening, they're going to go into school, and the school's going to be clean, so all of that will already be done. So they'll be able to devote their full attention to whatever the principal might need done that day or whatever kind of accidents might happen. And the other thing, the second consideration in this, which is not under the vote right now, is the ground maintenance. Some of these employees that we keep, we were hoping to make a crew that did nothing but ground maintenance, cutting grass. What we have now out of these 99 employees, they're cleaning the school, they're attending to the principals, whatever kind of accident, and they're mowing the grass. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so keeping the grounds, mowing the grass is not the same thing as cleaning a building. It's two different jobs, in my opinion. Okay, as I stated in facilities meeting, I clean the house and I also mow the grass. Not all the time, but I do. But I don't do it at the same time because it's just not the same job. I feel like that this is a good plan. Obviously, we have the people that are not going to be in our employ, but they're certainly going to be given an opportunity to go into this man's employ. We had another company that represented, and they represented very well as well. The committee felt like that we had some track record with High Standard, and they are a local company that we can, if there's a problem, that we can speak to somebody immediately. We're trying to, the facility, our desire and Dr. Harrell's desire is to raise the standard and raise the cleanliness level in our school. And like Ms. Strickland said, I have been into some schools that I felt like were spotless, and I have been into some that were not spotless. And so I think it's a good plan. I hope we can agree, a majority can agree to do it.
My concern, let me just say this, my concern is the 90 employees. And is there a way that, I mean, if some are not doing their job, then we follow regular procedures. But is there a way that when we had to reduce our number of teacher assistants, we went and as they left us, we did not replace them rather than to have to RIF them? Because that was the issue that we faced, that we expressed in the meeting that I happened to attend.
Yes, ma'am, and Mr. Hayes and I discussed that possibility as well as the possibility of keeping these individuals and then looking as they retire or positions are vacated because of performance issues or things like that, that we could potentially eliminate those positions. One of the concerns obviously was the savings. The more you keep, at some point the savings begins to get less and less and less if you're looking there. The other thing is my concern is, to be very honest with you, again, my standards are very high for myself personally as well. Regardless of what we do, we have got to step it up a notch. And whether that is we're moving forward with this with individuals that hopefully already have the training to come in our building, or if we're not moving forward, it's me coming up with some kind of training plan for the individuals that we have to try and get them where they need to be. We have to do something. So I think this, based on what the wishes and thoughts and desires were as we need to go, keeping in mind that higher level that we need to go, having concerns and issues with HR and trying to keep these people. And also, if you look at curriculum and instruction, I also would think these two items would be a benefit for the principal. As a building level principal, there was a lot of days I felt like I was a manager instead of being an instructional leader because I was dealing with a lot of issues around my building that kept me out of the classroom, where if I no longer have to worry about grounds And if I no longer have to worry about the cleanliness of my building, or if I do, I pick up the phone and call Dr. Harrell, who hopefully is on it, that's all I have to do, then I can spend more time with Ishii and working on my curriculum side to improve our instruction for our students. So I think there's benefits everywhere.
Ms. Dr. Harrell, with
Yes,
both
ma'am.
items, I don't have a problem with the program. I just was under the impression that we would not have to rift at this time. And so that kind of caught me off guard.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's where my concern is. It's not that I'm denying those two programs.
But would you
because-
like to have the discussion, since you brought it, would you like to potentially have a discussion on if we did not, what the savings might or might not be? Not to put Mr. Hayes on the spot, but
There probably would not be any savings. It would cost us more to retain all the staff we have and then also have the contractor do it.
May I ask
Yes.
something? Would it be within reason, I know time is of essence, because we probably would like, we're gonna do this, we'd like to have it in place before the school year starts, but I think, I'm not gonna say we're jumping the gun, but until we're talking about having another special called board meeting sometime early August, and I don't know without a date, hopefully it'll be somewhere in the first couple of weeks. Would that give you, Dr. Harrell, an opportunity to go out or either contact these principals or look at the size of their buildings or get input from them as to if they think that one person would be able to, and I know some of them probably, they need to be realistic in their answers, but, because they need to know, maybe look at what we're proposing to do, and then say, hey, we just can't make it with just one person. I mean, if they got, I would hate to have to clean up behind 700 people or 800 people. That's a big task.
Right.
And I understand the building's going to already be clean, but there's still, you got the everyday operation of the school building. And it may wind up being, if we could, we may wind up keeping 60. And then all of a sudden, we haven't riffed as many. And through attrition and through performance, we may be able to whittle that number down to 60 good ones. And I know the savings won't be $600,000, but it may well be $350,000 or $400,000. Still a savings is a savings. $300,000 is a significant amount of money. If that winds up, I'm just saying, would that give you an opportunity to do any due diligence as far as going around and touching base with principals or whatever?
Well, with the questions and the concerns that were posed to me tonight by Madam Chairman, additional time would give me more time to research and potentially provide some additional answers to you, look at the numbers a little more, or to speak to individual principals. Additional time would help. Again, as Mr. West had stated, our goal as we were looking at moving through this was, because of the call board meeting, we have school getting ready to start. But additional time would assist me with answering those questions.
And I'll just say this, I've had some really good feedback about high standard cleaning. I'm not anti the contract. I'm just saying, some of the concern in our committee meeting was some of our employees that we've had, 15, 20-year employees.
And I do not want to speak for the facilities committee, so members, please speak up anytime. I know, as we have discussed facilities, we do have that solid concern of our buildings and our buildings being cleanly, and it is the goal of all of our facilities committee. I feel like that we want to make sure we make the right decision for our people and our kids as we move forward, because this is a big decision for the board, I know that.
So would that be, can we move to maybe give him the opportunity to?
Well,
You have a motion.
You have a motion
we
on
have
the
a
table.
motion on the floor.
I can rescind my second.
But my thing is, do we need this now, or can we have time until the 9th or the 8th or the 7th?
If the 9th would give me time to answer your questions, I think it would be early enough, Ms. Burton, that if you could make a decision at that point in time, then it would help me with my directive as to which way I needed to go.
Question.
Did we not have?
Yes,
Madam Chair.
well, he was asking first. Mr. Pritchett.
If we can do that, can you send a email to the teachers at the schools where they have been in performance and give them 10 days and set up a survey monkey to respond
Can you help me with that?
and give us the results as well?
Yes, sir. Mr. Dirksen will help me with that.
Mr. Henderson?
Wasn't there some concern raised in facilities with these two companies that we told them that we would get back to them within 60 days.
I think that was the number. No. I think it's maybe been 20 days at this point, 15.
No, I think from the original time that they came in and did the presentation.
It's been about 30, 45,
it's been-
yeah, because we had the meeting in June.
June.
Oh, I thought you were talking about, well, get back with them and tell them we hadn't made a decision.
It was June 20th.
We
We had
certainly
this
tell them we need an
presentation,
extension
so
of
we're
time.
about
July
37 days
20th,
out.
August 20th, we'd still be
So if
fine.
we go August 9th, we're still within the parameters.
And what I would like to see you do, Dr. Harrell, is speak to the principals, because principals need to be calling you if they have concerns, and their teachers need to let them know if they have individual concerns. And then we can address those concerns.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Madam Chair, I rescind my, the second's been rescinded, I rescind my motion, so y'all move ahead however you see fit.
So do I need another motion?
No,
or
you don't.
We just take the accept
Motion's
the
withdrawn.
information?
Just one parting comment, if I may.
Okay.
The Evergreen study that was referred to earlier in the evening by Mr. Wright, I think it was done a dozen years or so ago. As part of that study, at that time, there was a recommendation that we did not have near enough custodial service. Is that not correct, Mr. Bridges?
That's correct.
The recommendation that we hire appreciably more. I can't remember the numbers, but it's time to do something if it's wrong.
And you're going to continue with number H?
Yes, ma'am, I'd like to, please.
Before you go forward on that, what was the dollar amount of the custodial contract?
The dollar amount was $4,445,075.
4445075?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Actually, the contract is about 2.9, but the balance of that would be the people that we would
keep.
So the total cost that we're looking at is 4.4.
Okay, but
About 2.9.
And the 5 million is what we're currently paying, is that correct?
Right.
So that's where you got to say.
$5,133,000.
Right.
That's what we're currently
With the
paying.
day
Okay.
orders, added in, comes up to 4.
Okay.
And I
That-
apologize for that, I wasn't clear enough. Thank you.
And that contract would need legal review?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I've got the legal review part down pat. Madam Chairman, if I could please move to H real quickly. So you have in your board docs just something I put together to look at our grounds crew estimates. This is something that I would really love for us to strongly consider tonight and moving forward. As I've been around looking at our schools, I call it curb appeal, or outside of our schools needs some assistance. As I currently shared, our day porters or custodians are mowing our grounds as well as trying to maintain the inside of the building. A couple of the principals that I have spoke with said this would be a welcome relief for them, because as school begins to come in session and staff returns to the building, you can imagine that the custodial staff or day porters are very busy trying to help teachers move in, rooms, those items. So grounds may be one thing that lacks. It is also one of those things you hear me mention again, having that uniform standard from school to school, that regardless of where you go, we have an expectation for our grounds. So this proposal, as you look at the top line, people would be the largest expense. Now keep in mind, when we look at salaries, we're looking at 12 people, 3 crews. If we move forward with the custodial proposal, this would be negligible because we already would have those people in place as they come over. But even if we did not move forward with that, I think this would be minimum. When you look at the other costs there, the truck and trailers, we're looking at 3 apiece. It could be some potential that we might have something already there in maintenance that would suffice, but I know we'll need trailers. The biggest thing that we're really good on at this point in time, if that's the proper Queen's English, is that most of our schools have around 5 mowers. I think I was at Eastern Wayne High School about a week or 2 ago, and I counted 5 riding mowers within that building. We have plenty of mowers in the district that we would not have to spend money on buying lawnmowers to pull back for us to use. So the proposal would be that we would propose that Wayne County Public School grounds crews take over all mowing, including the landscaping outside the school's athletic fences. So the landscaping, of course, entails the shrubbery, the mulch, edging, spraying Roundup, all those things that you might do at home yourself, but doing those for our schools to increase our curb appeal that we have, having that standardization. We would pull back the mowers that we have out there. We have a lot of mowers that belong to Wayne County Public Schools, that belong to us. I say that because, of course, some of our schools have their own mowers. So you might be at a high school where a Booster Club, the Cougar Club, the St. They might have bought, the Eagle Club might have bought a mower specifically for the football field or specifically for the baseball field. So we would leave those in place at their school because someone at that school bought that mower for that school to be specifically used for that purpose. Okay? We would continue to service and maintain equipment that our grounds crew uses. Currently at maintenance, we have one mechanic that services every mower and weed eater in our district. And you can imagine that his shop, at last time I was in there this morning, they were lined up with mowers. So he stays very busy going and coming back out. Now the individual schools would become responsible for maintaining their equipment as well as providing fuel and the routine maintenance items. So right now we currently provide the fuel to mow the athletic fields as well as the school fields. Now we, the board and your wisdom, you've been, I think, very gracious to our schools, especially athletic purposes, because our schools do not have to pay for travel for athletics. In some districts, they're having to pay for travel. My previous school, I spent $35,000 a year just on athletic travel. We had to raise that money. So on one hand, as I spoke to one high school principal, and he felt like this was realistic, that it would not be a burden if they kept their mowers and they had to buy their fuel just to mow their fields. Why do we want to look at doing this? Well, the number one reason is this would again free up our custodial staff and day porters to focus solely on the building. The second issue we've got, to be very honest with you, is as I've stepped into this position, some of the first phone calls I have received our mowers are not working, the tractor's broke down, the weed eater's not working, can you help me? We need something. And as I investigate it, someone overfilled the mower with oil at the side of the school. Someone forgot to mix the oil with the gas of the weed eater and it locked it up. And so we have mowers that are around $8,000 to $9,000 each as these mowers are bought that are recurrently being damaged. They're being run into athletic fences and the wheels are being broken off. And not to diminish anyone's service, but just like I'm sure your personal mower at home, you use it every day, you look after it every day, if the same person uses it, has a tendency to be used in a little better manner and cleaned off. So I do feel like that moving to this, when we really look at budgeting, would save us some money in the long run. As far as utilization of the mowers, we would not buy any mowers. We would begin to basically phase out the older equipment that we have. We'd use it up. When it was no longer serviceable, then we would look to see what we would need at that point. So again, that uniform standard, and we are very greatly positioned to move forward with this at this point. So what I'm asking the board to consider is, regardless of our custodial proposal, and I know we have discussed those 12 people coming over, I would really love to move forward with this. As I did broach this with our principals at leadership, I thought some of them were going to give me a standing ovation when I mentioned the lawn care services. Because our principals, I've been there, I've been in that seat, and our principals are really working hard to do that curriculum piece. And they're really working hard to make sure that school is ready. This would be something they would not have to worry about, would be taken off their plate.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Mr. Smith? Oh.
No, I was going to make a motion that we approve this tonight.
Okay, I have no problem with that. I'll reserve my comment for discussion.
Well, I got discussion too, so.
Okay. So, Mr. Pridgen, you were gonna make a motion?
I did, I just did. I make a motion that we approve this contract grounds crew for the grounds crew acceptance tonight.
Second.
To do what? I'm sorry.
For the ground crew
To
to be hired,
To establish a grounds crew specifically for the purpose of mowing all of our schools.
Okay. And we have a first and a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
First thing, Madam Chair, if I may.
No, I was laughing because you all are competing again.
No, we're not.
No, not competing in a negative manner, but having a
okay.
comment at the same time.
Well, I deferred last time. I'm not deferring this time. No, Dr. Harrell, very very, very good proposal. I'm in favor of it. No ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. But I do have a concern, and I have an insurance expert right next to me. My concern is with regard to those mowers that were not purchased by the school system, and the possibility of improperly maintained equipment if we're not going to maintain it. Right. Our liability as it relates to allowing those mowers to remain on our property, you know, and what liability we have as it relates to that.
That's a very good question. So in the past, when I have operated these systems and the school was responsible for maintaining the mowers, it was not just your ag teacher or your mechanics teacher. So the school would have a contract or have someone reputable to have the services. My school in the past would send their stuff to Quality Equipment because we had John Deere mowers, and they would service the mower and bring it back. The thing it did allow me as a principal was it gave me buy-in that if my baseball coach messed up my $9,000 mower, then I had the conversation with my baseball coach about that. Now, one of the things that we do have to make sure on that insurance side, Mr. Smith, is as we have these discussions with these crews, that they are using the equipment properly. So we will obviously have to make sure there's training there for these men or women, make sure the guards are down. You know, I have seen situations and circumstances as you have grounds crews, a windshield might get cracked or bust as they're mowing. Accidents happen, but we want to make sure our crews are using their due diligence to make sure the equipment is being used properly if something happens with that.
Along with what he was asking, though, my question would be, well, I have two questions. My question would be, first of all, if you're still allowing a Booster Club lawnmower to be mowed by a Booster Club person on a football field, and they cut their foot off,
right,
we're liable.
I would say that's not allowable, because if I understand our policies and how we need to operate is that Wayne County Public School employees operate Wayne County Public School.
But we do have some Booster Club people out there cutting grass.
We do, and we need to correct that.
But you just said Wayne County employees using Wayne County mowers.
Mm-hmm.
In here it says outside of the athletic fields. So that means inside of the athletic fields, a Booster Club member using a Booster Club mower is not the same, is
right.
it?
No, ma'am. So what I would like to do is if I understand our mower situation correctly, Ms. Strickland, the majority of our schools have some kind of mower. Like some of our football coaches may have a real mower that only touches the football field. Mm-hmm. And our coaches probably would not want our grounds crews to touch their stuff anyway. They're very peculiar about what they do. We would need to make sure and ensure, number one, that if they have something to mow with, mm-hmm, to maintain that, and then that they understand that our staff needs to be the only ones mowing, because I agree with Mr. Pridgeon that if we have a Booster Club person that is doing us a favor, you can look at it that way, and they get cut, get injured, then we could be liable because we've allowed them to do that. Now, our coaches get paid money to maintain and mow our grounds, so I would have concerns with that if we are on the athletic side, as that's part of my responsibility. We're paying middle school and high school ADs that they can divvy the money out, a stipend to maintain our facilities during the summer months, as well as they get a coaching stipend to coach their sport or their outdoor sports. I would have a concern that someone is, because we're really getting people on one hand that's being paid as a responsibility to do this.
Oh, you need to check into your youth associations, though. A lot of times your elementary youth associations are
right,
cutting field grass.
And we do, you're correct. We have a couple, like I know probably Rosewood has one, Grantham Elementary has one, and they have taken over the mowing and the lining of the fields across the road that used to be the old middle school athletic fields with the youth sports associations. So that may be a different discussion than the grounds mowing. That may truly be an insurance liability question because of those youth sports associations. And they may have their own insurance, I'm not sure.
Okay, Mr. Pridgeon.
I only got to ask my first question a while ago. My second question was, if we have 5 days of rain what's your plan with those people?
All right, so the reason, that's a very good question. The reasons that we've asked for a team of 4 is that, number one, if one's missing, I'm going to get to your question just so we all know, if one's missing, we can continue. Because if we went to 3 and we're down to a 2-man or 2-woman team, we're concerned that the mowing will continue to get done. The other thing we're looking at doing is having an off-type schedule. So let's say the winter time, that grass mowing is not going as heavy as it needs to be. We can pull these individuals and give them other responsibilities to do. If it's operations where it comes to delivery, doing things there, as well as maintenance, some of these may move over from maintenance, so they might have that skill set they can assist there. Our goal is not to be idle. A lot of times, Mr. Pridgeon, what I've noticed with grounds crews is if there are days that do not permit mowing, then there are other opportunities that they can do, like trimming shrubs, hauling mulch, or doing some things there if the grass is too wet. Now, obviously, they're not going to do it in the pouring rain, but if the grass is wet, they can do those things.
Okay.
But you would find something for them when
Absolutely.
they decide to build, replace ceiling tiles,
Absolutely.
or assist with some of the maintenance stuff.
Yes, I have seen districts that have done, I like to call it the road warriors, where crews have just gone around and visited schools and just taken care of minor issues like ceiling tiles, things like that. And then maintenance is taking care, the plumbers, those things have hit the big stuff. And you do a rotation. And that's another potential item. I don't want to hit everybody at one time with all my stuff. But that's another potential item we can discuss in the future as well. But we would, as Mr. West says, we're paying for these people to work, and we'd make sure they have something to do.
All right, are we ready for the vote? All in favor of establishing the ground maintenance crews for district-wide services, indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed? All right, so move. I think you're in charge of the next one as well.
Yes, ma'am. My last one is just a quick one, just moving forward out of the Facilities Committee again. This item has been before you a couple of times, looking at the air-conditioned units in the agriculture and automotive shop at CBA. As you probably remember from our previous discussion, we were looking at moving some barred units from mobiles on the campus at Spring Creek High School. We looked into those. Those units were non-serviceable. They were not working. So from there, I was directed by Facilities Committee to get some other opportunities and options. So maintenance come back with 2 potential proposals. One was looking at adding air-conditioned units outside both shops and running duct work into the shop so that the air would be distributed evenly. That was a very expensive proposal. We were looking at $60,000 per shop, so that would be $120,000 to have someone come in and install air conditioning. So the next proposal from maintenance, and maintenance would take care of this, so I'm really just asking for permission to move forward. The maintenance will look at installing 4 barred units. These are the window units that go in like you see on our mobiles, 2 for each shop. It would be more zone cooling, but it's a lot more expensive. The total would be $25,000, $15,000 for 4 barred units. So they're a lot cheaper. And then the $10,000 would be allowable for maintenance to do some structural work to Charles B. Aycock. If you're familiar with CBA and Southern Wayne, both those schools were built about the same time, and they have that fiberglass wall, for lack of better words, on the outside. So that wall is not strong enough to support the units. So they'll need to do some structural work. So really what I'm asking for tonight is for you to give me a motion so I can move forward. I will definitely come back if any of our barred units are above our $5,000 amount. That can either come through facilities or finance for you to approve. But we have a game plan to move forward with that. So I'm just asking for permission to go with that option.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the request for the air-conditioned units in the shops.
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor, indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board.
Thank you very much. All right, before we have JK and L. All right. Dr. Dunsmore?
Item J, Madam Chairman, it was requested that we add consideration of the drug testing program to move forward and send that to Policy Committee and get the financial costs and things put together to bring back for the August meeting.
Are we going to have an opportunity policy to meet before? I guess we would.
Yes, it's on the 7th, I believe. I mean, the 8th.
Okay.
We have a policy meeting on the
Okay.
8th. Am I correct, Dr. Mason?
And I can work, Mr. Schwartz, with you and your team and get those other policies gathered up prior to
Yep.
that also.
Will this need to be policy or also finance?
Well, and
finance is the
we'll
money.
work with the company on the
But can we
specific
even
cards,
afford it?
the specific costs, excuse me, not cards, and how many times we would want to test that and get all those.
Because we won't know that until policy decides what number we're going to test per building, so.
Okay.
All right.
So I guess the motion right now is I'd like to make a motion that we go forward with exploring the possibility of the drug policy and sending it to the policy committee to look at any changes we would need to make. Would that be good enough, Mr. Schwartz?
No, I thought we needed one to give consideration of the drug testing. Did we already vote on that?
No, we haven't.
yeah.
Then I make a motion that we move forward with considering the drug testing, or that we do it. Yeah, there we go.
Based on the
forward.
policy, you want to add that?
No.
You need.
We need to see if there's
You'll-
interest enough to go forward from there.
That's what it is,
So,
consideration of drug testing program.
there's my motion, is that I make a motion that we, as a board, go forward with drug testing.
I second.
Just to see if we've got enough interest.
Yes.
Okay.
That's where I'm at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if
And
we
that's
don't, we
what
don't
this
need to waste
statement is
time in
about.
policy trying to come up with
Yeah, there's
policy.
no reason to send it any further if there's not enough interest.
Yeah, but while we're doing that, then we can start getting the paperwork for the policy.
Oh, no, I'm talking about first, let's do this vote to see if there's enough interest, and then I will make a second motion to send it to policy.
The motion, as I understand it, is that the board move forward with consideration of drug testing program.
Correct.
She made the motion and I'll second.
All right, any discussion? I want to make sure that you understand what we're voting on. We're voting to give consideration of the drug testing program.
Yes, because right now, we haven't even spoken as a board if we're interested. So if it dies right now, 2 to 5, we stop.
Okay. Is that what you think we're voting on?
Yeah, because there's no
Okay.
reason to continue to move forward if we're not in favor of doing it. So.
Drug testing program for student athletes.
Student
Let's
athletes.
include that in the
Yes,
motion.
thank you, that is fine.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Show by raising your right hand. Any opposed? All right.
Madam Chair, may I make a request moving forward before you do the next motion, that we use the term extracurricular activities, because I do realize sometimes cheerleaders are considered athletes, but we also have band members and other students that are in programs after school that, in all fairness to our athletes, would be included in that. So if we could use.
So we're going to include band, et
So
cetera,
you
so
need
the
a-
extracurricular?
Yes.
You need a motion to amend the previous motion, previously approved motion, to move forward with consideration of a drug testing program for extracurricular activities.
Did we say for students, though? We didn't say
said
for.
for
Yes.
We didn't say for student athletes, did we? We said.
Yes, you did.
Yes,
We
we
did,
did.
okay.
For student
Then I'd like
athletes.
to make a motion to amend the last motion to include extracurricular activities.
Apologize for not catching that quicker.
Okay, that's fine.
You're fine.
All right, I need a second.
I second it, but I have a question when you ask for discussion.
All right, we have a first and a second. Is there any discussion?
My question would be directed at Ron, I guess, is when we include, are we going to diminish the percentage of student athletes that we test by including,
That's up to you.
including
Policy.
extracurricular activities such as band, cheerleading, what have you, because.
We set the standard for the number that we
I
want.
understand that,
listed.
but I mean, I guess input from him, would we need to make it a wider spectrum of, I mean, the number bigger, I mean, we haven't even set a number yet, but
That would be
what would your recommend, well, I don't know if I can ask you for a
If
recommendation.
you put the extracurricular activities, you're diluting the athlete pool.
That was my question.
But it's probably,
But
it
did
would be
we-
more effective to do extracurricular activities because there are a lot of people you'd be interested in that have no sports at all.
Yeah, but Mr. Jeanette, you mentioned 16 as an example, or 30 as an example, we could set the standard for 40 to be tested if we wanted to,
Which wouldn't dilute it as
Correct.
which wouldn't dilute it as
And
much.
that's gonna come out of policy, whatever.
And you can also
Go with
set
50.
24 athletes and the other 24.
And that's fine.
We'll work on that.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, are we ready for the vote? All right, all in favor
Of the
of
amendment.
of adding to the motion extracurricular activities? Is that all right?
Yep.
All right, indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed? No. Okay.
Now,
I'd like to make a motion that we now send this drug policy consideration to the policy committee for further review.
Second.
All right,
Is that
any
good enough, Mr.
discussion?
Schwartz?
That's fine.
Okay.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor indicate by show of raising your right hand. Any opposed? No. All right, Dr. Dunsmore, the next one is.
Yes, Madam Chair, on item K, based on the percentage of Dr. McKibben this evening, the agenda was amended to bring that to a vote, to use Dr. McKibben's firm to do a specific study for Wayne County Public Schools.
Okay, now are we voting on a consideration? Are we voting on for him to do the study for Wayne County Public Schools?
To do the study.
My understanding was to do the study,
All right.
as Mr. Henderson's.
Okay, I need a
I'll make a
first.
motion that,
You got it.
I'd like to make a motion that we employ the services of McKibben to do demographic work for the Wayne County Public Schools.
I second.
All right. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I have some discussion. The monetary amount, I think, was $26,000.
26.9.
Okay. In a previous conversation, there was some consideration given to looking at some other firms. We never heard any conversation about that tonight. Okay.
Did we not vote to have him come to make a presentation
We did.
tonight?
Yes.
We did.
Okay. Did we ask that we invite other companies, Dr. Dunsmore?
Yeah, I reached out as that was presented early to the Evergreen study. I also reached out to NC State, and they're about a year behind.
Okay.
The motion should include the dollar amount of 26,900.
Well, I didn't know because at the last meeting, we said something about his expenses for tonight would be deducted from that 26.9. Right. So I'll go ahead and
Right.
say that 26.9.
So the 26.9 would include it. yeah.
26.9.
Okay. Mr. Flowers, to address your concern, wouldn't we, when we work with him, ask him for those specifics that you were talking about tonight, as well as what he was doing, because he would have the data?
That wasn't my concern, Madam Chair. My concern was, there is a specific GIS company right here across from the Y in Wayne County, and I don't think they've been contacted. But let's move along with this. I'm good.
All right?
I have one comment with regard to the presentation, and I pointed it out during the Title I presentation. You know, there's definitely a disagreement, I'll say, on the issue of socioeconomic status being a criteria, and that is something that I have held to, and I will continue to hold to as we start talking about redistricting. I think socioeconomic status definitely needs to be a part of anything that we do as it relates to redistricting, but when to hear the demographers say that socioeconomic status has no correlation to school performance, and then to hear our Title I experts say it does, that causes me concern. I need to make that very clear.
Well, I agree
think you
with you.
said that.
I wish that he could still
I
be
don't
here
think
to
you said
answer
that.
the concern.
Well, he did answer it. He said
said
it didn't have
answer.
any correlation.
He did answer.
He did answer. He was very clear. So, but I just want to
talking
make
about
sure
growth.
that I state that for the record.
That's what I heard him say.
I thought he was talking about growth.
No, he said we've socioeconomics.
Yeah, but I thought he was talking about socioeconomic status with regard to growth.
No, my
Population.
question was directly socioeconomic status as regard to school performance as a criteria for redistricting. And he said that in his opinion, socioeconomic status has had no effect, no longer has an effect on school performance. That's exactly what he told me. That's what I understood him to say. I'll say that.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we ready to vote? All in favor of Mr. McKibbins being our demographer
In the dollar amount of $26,900.
in the dollar amount of $26,900? All in favor, you may indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed?
Abstain.
All right, one opposed and one abstain. All right,
Madam Chair,
yes.
along with that, I'd like to make a motion that we give him, because I think he was telling us that there were certain factors that needed to be things that he needed to look at specifically. And I think the Student Assignment Committee has talked about proximity and socioeconomic status and stuff like that. So I'd like to make a motion that the items that have been discussed in Student Assignment Committee, and Dr. Lewis, help me out with the factors.
Obviously, we'll be glad to provide Dr. McKibben and his team with anything they request of us, anything that's already been completed, or if there's anything that we need to do.
But he was specifically saying that we needed to give him direction as to what were some of the criteria that we needed to make sure he focused in on. And I know that we had set up at the beginning, when we first did student assignment.
We prioritized.
We prioritized what those factors were.
We didn't prioritize, we discussed 4 different, and I think it was efficiency, proximity. Oh, gosh.
Hold on a minute.
There were 4 different things that, choice was another one, and we discussed all those 4. But as we discussed when we first started this business, some of those are in competition with each other, right? Choice and efficiency don't go together very well, and things like that. So I think that he will probably ask the board to give him parameters to work within and set priorities under what, as he's going through and making his study and then making recommendations, I have a feeling he'll ask for input.
All right. There's no need for a motion for that. Didn't you ask me that, Mr. Henderson?
Yeah, but you're saying we don't need a motion?
Don't need a motion.
No.
Give him that direction.
We don't need a motion. We're required to give him that information. At this time, we need to have a motion for a special call board meeting at 9 a.m. And really, we need to discuss the date first before we can even grant give the motion.
Right, that agenda item was amended to change it simply to a special board meeting in August.
Okay.
So you could determine the date.
All right, I need a motion for a special board meeting in August.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, now, we want to discuss the date.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may, I think we had determined that the 10th was not a good date for several members. I would like to bring the board's attention, we have our policy meeting on the 10th, and there's going to be some discussion coming out of policy that
Not
will
on the
be...
10th?
No, not the 10th.
I'm sorry, the 8th. I looked at the
Okay.
10 a.m. and,
Okay.
sorry about that, it's late. On the 8th, so I would recommend, if possible, we move to the 9th, or ask if the 9th's a possibility in case of anything coming out of policy the day prior.
Madam Chair, that week is not good for me. The following week, I could meet probably any day.
Well,
But I mean, you know, me.
okay, could I ask Dr. Mason, is it possible that we could have the policy committee meeting earlier?
Yes, ma'am. I was just sharing with the superintendent, I am not here on that 8th, so I need to communicate with you all. We need to move that date. So
Okay.
we can move that policy committee meeting. I would certainly love for it to be earlier. If you all agree, either the 1st or
1st or 2nd of September?
August.
I was just thinking about the dates and I wouldn't be here, okay.
First is out for me.
What about the 2nd?
Second's good depending on the time.
Okay, Mr.
West.
West,
The second is not good for me. I have a dentist appointment when I have some dental work to be done, but, I mean, someone else can sit in my place.
Switch the
Third, does that work for you, Ms. Strickland?
She said the 31st.
31st.
Oh, the 31st, oh.
The 31st will work depending on the time. I can be here by 9:30.
That's a Tuesday.
well, we have scheduled everything through the 31st for special hearings that we're holding. So,
Our original thought this morning afternoon after we held this last round of hearings was to have what we hoped
Would be our
the
last.
of the hearings on the 7th. But those will require board action. We were hoping for a special call meeting sometime around the 8th, 9th, 10th, so that families would then know what they needed to do headed back to school. So it's kind of looking now like we might be able to just do what we can between now and whenever this special call meeting is. And we may have to come together and just do the best we can after.
I am good on the 3rd as well.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
You had asked if we were good for the 3rd, so if we're going to wrap up that conversation, I'm good for the 3rd.
What about 31st?
You good for the 3rd?
For the 3rd?
for policy,
That's a Friday,
That's your dumb.
that's a Friday. What time?
They don't work on Friday.
8 o'clock?
They don't work on Friday.
Aren't y'all back in? Because it's
Isn't that
Not
the
yet.
one that-
Not yet.
Oh, okay, they don't work
I
on
can be
Friday.
there on Friday, I don't know, Dr. Mesa, if you
That's
can't.
fine.
What about the
That
31st?
Friday will work, that's the,
How about the 31st, Ms. Strickland? That's a Tuesday.
it's fine
She
by
said that
me.
works.
she said depending on the time, anytime you're on.
This-
9:30.
The earlier the better for me.
The 31st.
But I thought, so you clearing that day?
Are you waiving
Or,
that day?
You're talking about your policy meeting
Yes.
right now.
Mhm.
I think if you set your policy meeting, that's going to drive when the
That's-
board meeting is.
that's right.
And we can back up from there and set the hearings. As
Okay,
long as we get the hearings in before the special call board meeting, then the board can take action on them in closed session.
okay.
Or as part of
So
consent
policy's
agenda.
either the 31st, which is a Tuesday, or Friday the 3rd.
Isn't Friday the 3rd bad for you?
I'm good with that.
All right, the 31st, what
Friday
time?
the 30th.
You can make it good for me since we are moving the dates.
9:30.
At 9:30 I can be here. I'll have
On the
everybody dropped
31st.
off.
Yes, sir.
31st.
July?
I say 10 o'clock.
Well, I can't.
So you're changing policy to July 31st at 9:30 a.m.
Yes.
and not having August 8th.
That's correct.
And then you're gonna make,
And you
you're
said
gonna
9
make
o'clock?
that happen. What we-
9:30.
Let's see
9:30.
when your special call meeting is,
Okay.
and
Now
then three
we're
of
to the
you
special
guys and myself can set the hearing date.
So let's move to the special call meeting date. Does the first or second work for everybody?
Of August.
Yeah.
Second.
And I know, Dr. Harold, that kind of imposes on your time. Are you good?
The first or second, what you mean?
Of
August.
August. Wednesday the 1st or Thursday the 2nd, ma'am.
For what?
Our special call?
Special call.
meeting.
I can do the second.
I can do the first easier than I can do the second.
No, the 31st was for policy, not board.
So the first
If I
or
come
second
on the
of
first, I'll
August
be
for the
late.
special call
But
meeting.
what time on the 1st
So
would we
why
need
can't
to
we
do
do it
it?
on the 6th?
Mr. Flowers won't be here.
On the 6th,
Oh,
did you say the 6th? I could do it on the 6th.
Oh, you can?
Okay,
I
6
could-
is
I could
good.
do it, I could do it on the very first of that week.
That's
I
that
just-
Monday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could do it on the 6th
what time?
after 9:30 or after.
Okay.
6 works for me.
6th at 9:30?
All right, mm-hmm.
Mr. Strickland?
Mr. Smith?
I'm good.
Mr. Smith?
You're good.
Good.
All right, there you have it.
6 at 9:30.
That was easy.
Well, we work together.
All right.
You should have a motion to approve that as a special call meeting date and time.
You're awful quiet.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to have a special call board meeting on August the 6th at 9:30.
I need a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor of a special board meeting on August 6th at 9, beginning at 9:30? Show by raising your right hand. Any opposed? All right. All right, now we're at the consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to request, I know it's an AR, but I'd still like it discussed, letter K, AR 3320, be pulled for just a short discussion.
Madam Chair, I would like letter N, policy 5130, student voter registration and pre-registration pool for additional discussion.
N.
In November.
Okay.
Madam Chair, on F, approval of contracts and POs, I need to recuse myself from 2 of the votes on that.
So,
All right, now,
Madam Chair,
yes.
item F, approval of contracts.
Item F, yeah, we got, oh, he's recused, you want me to pull?
but it's got to be pulled so you can vote
Okay.
separate.
Hmm?
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, it will, no.
Yeah, under consent agenda, won't pull it. You talk about some of it.
Now, for clarification for me.
Wait, I'm sorry, the last thing was Mr. Flowers is pulling F
Yes.
off the agenda? Okay.
Approval of
And
contracts.
Mr. Pridgeon is recusing himself from.
No, I'm only recusing myself from 2 of the items
Two,
that have to be
oh,
voted on.
2 of the items that are on, F. 2 items, okay. All right, now, in terms of the first readings, and we have identified them, are we willing to vote for them in a package? Or is there any concern about addressing any one of them individually?
Madam Chair, on those items, you need a motion to amend the recommended actions for consent agenda items 5J, 5L, 5M, 5Q, 5S, and 5T to read, recommended to the board for final approval on first reading.
Okay, I need a motion to do that?
Yes.
Did you include O?
No, O is not a policy, I don't believe.
Okay, so give me.
Hold on
okay.
one second, let me check her.
5210, I think, isn't it?
So it would be J,
O is 5210.
L,
It should have included, I should have included O, I'm sorry.
M,
M, O,
O, Q,
Q, S, and T.
Q, S, and T. All right, so we don't need P. We don't need the AR?
No,
Okay, on
because
either
those are
one.
for information only.
Okay. Now. All right, so now, do I do that before we start voting on personnel?
You can approve the consent agenda with the exclusions of items 5F, K, and N. But you need to approve the motion first for approving those items on first reading.
All right, so I need to approve first the items on first reading. All right, I need a motion to approve.
The motion would be to amend the recommended actions for consent agenda items 5J, L, M, O, Q, S, and T to read, recommended to the board for final approval on first reading.
All right,
So moved.
thank you.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed? All right, we took care of her. Now, do I vote to pull, or do I vote for the consent agenda? And I need to pull item F, item K,
No, N, I'm sorry, F, K, and N.
F, K, and N, okay. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda with consideration to, do I do that first?
Read the consent agenda. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
First, I need Mr. Smith to read consent agenda information.
A consent agenda is a group of items passed with a single motion and a vote. These materials and/or items are routine business or have been thoroughly discussed in committee meetings open to the public and attended by board members. No debate is allowed on any item included on the consent agenda. If a board member wants separate consideration of any item, it may be removed by request.
All right. So now I need a motion for us to approve the consent agenda minus F, K, and N.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I would like to vote on the general personnel report individually. No, I mean, just to have the opportunity to vote on that as a separate entity. So we're asking to have that.
So I need to pull that, so. Okay.
5B would be removed as well then.
Yes, we need to add B to B, F, K, and N. All right?
Okay, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Pridgeon asked to be excused from voting on 2 items on 5F.
Yes.
If you don't want to be excused from voting on all of 5F, then you need to identify which 2 items on 5F, and the board needs to approve that request.
Okay, I'll be glad.
Do I do that separately
Yes, before you vote on the others.
before I vote on the consent agenda? Okay,
That would be on, let me, that come up on the computer here.
okay.
I need to be recused from line number 12 with Lawson Products. It says Larson Products, but that's actually Lawson Products. And then also on item number 32, Lawson Products. I was employed by that company for 12 years. I am a stockholder in that company, and I do have a vested interest in that company. So I need to be recused from just those 2.
Okay. All right. I need a motion to recuse Mr. Pridgeon from voting on 2 items under F. One would be line 12, Lawson Products. The other would be line 32, Lawson Products.
So moved.
All right. Any discussion?